Welcome back to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners Policy Session on June 1st, 2021. Gary, take it up.
All right, we're going to return to the issues list and the requests for consent agenda. I'll follow the people who are in the room, and I'll ask Rod Cook first. So we're jumping to Health, Housing, and Human Services. You'll note on today's agenda update, the Housing Authority consent agenda item is pulled, so that is not on the agenda, but Health, Housing, and Human Services. Quite a list. I'll read them first, and then Rod, if you'll add to it. First, approval of an amendment to an agreement with the Federal Highway Administration under the Federal Lands Access Program for operations funding for the Mount Hood Express service to Timberline Lodge. This amendment extends the agreement for 7 months and increases the total amount by $18,400 for a total agreement of $1,623,408. This is funded through the Federal Highway Administration and has no general funds involved. Go ahead, Rod.
Yes, and I'll just add to what the administrator said. The grant amendment extends the funding for operating the Mount Hood Express between City of Sandy, Government Camp, and Timberline, and other communities along Highway 26. Everything else has been discussed.
Yes?
So seeking approval to put this on the consent agenda.
Any, okay, got it. Thank you, Rod.
Right. And everything's going on for this Thursday. You already agreed to that, Commissioners. Thank you. Next, approval of a contract with MTR Western LLC for the shuttle operation services. The term of this contract is $942,504 and is funded through the State Transportation Improvement Fund. No general funds are involved. Go ahead, Rod.
Okay, to add to this one, this shuttle will help reduce fragmentation between TriMet communities within Clackamas County, but fall outside of the TriMet service district. It's already been mentioned, the shuttle operation services for the Oregon City and Clackamas Industrial Last Mile Shuttles as part of the Regional Coordination Program, RCP.
Any objections or comments? Hearing none, it's a go.
Next, approval of an intergovernmental agreement, amendment number 2 with the State of Oregon, Department of Human Services, Aging and People with Disabilities Division for the provision of the Oregon Money Management Program in Clackamas County. This is for $458,050 and is funded through state general funds. No county general funds are involved. Go ahead, Rod.
Yes, and the Oregon Money Management Program services are provided for seniors and disabled adults who need help managing their finances. The Oregon Money Management Program staff train community volunteers to become representative payees and bill payers who work to ensure that clients' public benefits are used for high priority needs such as shelter, health care, and food. And as the administrator mentioned, no general funds are involved.
Any objections or comments? Hearing none, it's a go.
All right, next, approval for the Children, Family, and Community Connections Division of Health, Housing, and Human Services to apply for the Housing Authority of Clackamas County, to apply to the Housing Authority of Clackamas County for supportive housing services. The maximum grant is $2.5 million. There's no match required and no general fund is involved. Is this timely, Rod, based on the other conversations the board's having?
The procurement process is in play. And so they would still need to apply. If something happens with SHS, this would be a non-factor.
Okay. It's just to get the mechanisms of the procurement process in play because it takes a while. It's dependent on funds being received. So
yes.
No funds received, then it won't go forward.
Absolutely.
Got it. Okay.
Is there language in there that says it's contingent upon funding?
Most of the RFPs that are put out from the county will say that, have that language in there. And also, if you even go to contract, it'll also have a line in there that says the same thing.
Please make sure, Rod. Any other objections?
Is it just possible, maybe for anything related to this, just put in the packet for Thursday that contingent upon available funds?
Yes.
Okay.
Good idea.
Yes.
Any other comments? It's a go with those provisions.
Okay. Next, approval of a construction contract between Clackamas County and Ban Lin Construction for the Sandy Health Center project. This is for $4,738,515 and is funded through the Health Center's Division funds. There are no general funds involved. Rod, go ahead.
Yes, and I think we've had this before you in different variations, but basically it's the Sandy Clinic that we're building. And as mentioned, there's no general funds involved in this one.
Any objections or comments? Seeing none, go ahead.
Next, approval to accept a grant award with the Tides Foundation in partnership with Kaiser Permanente for participation in the Virtual Care Innovation Network Clinic Connection Track. The maximum value is $12,000 and is funded through the Tides Foundation. No general funds are involved. Rod, go ahead.
Yeah, adding on to this one, this funding will allow health centers to engage with peers to discuss and solve challenges related to providing and sustaining virtual care. And again, no general funds are involved in this one.
Any objections or comments? Hearing none. Go ahead.
Next, approval of a home loan documents with Webster Road Housing Limited Partnership for the Webster Road Redevelopment in Gladstone, Oregon. The home fund is $400,000 and is a long-term loan with 0% interest. No general funds are involved. Go ahead, Rod.
Yes, and this one we've brought before you several times, May 18th and again on May 20. You've talked about the Webster project. This is actually the home loan piece of it. And so that funding, basically, it's part of the total funding package. And the HAC is proposing to enter into a leasehold agreement with Webster Road Limited Partnership for the rehab of a building which will be developed into 48 affordable housing units. No general fund. But on this one, there is a special piece I'd like to read here. Due to closing constraints, some documents may not be ready for approval until on or immediately before closing. H3S requests the Board of County Commissioners chair or delegate or county administrator be delegated authority to execute home loan documents necessary to complete transaction. And so that'd be the chair or county commissioner is what we're asking. So if there's signature on those loan documents, that you two can, one of the two of you could sign those pretty quickly.
Rod, I'm sorry for my hearing deficit, but did you say that the closing documents, to do what with those again?
Yeah, the closing documents kind of similar to if we were closing on a home.
Yes.
Like they show up and we need rapid response to it. So what we're asking is that either you, the chair, or Gary, the administrators, your call, be able to sign on those documents on our behalf, on the county's behalf.
Is that anything unusual, Gary?
No.
I mean, all the documents will be viewed and reviewed by council before you sign, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I have no problem with that. Any objections? Hearing none.
All right, next, approval of an amendment to an agreement with Care Oregon regarding crisis respite services provided by Cascadia Behavioral Health Care. This contract is valued up to $364,270 and is funded through the state of Oregon. No general funds are involved. Go ahead, Rod.
This one's pretty straightforward. It is for crisis respite services provided by Cascadia Behavioral Health Care. Amendment outlines reimbursement procedures between Care Oregon and Cascadia and Clackamas County Behavioral Health Division. No general funds.
Any objections? Seeing none.
Next, approval of an amendment to a subrecipient agreement with Cascadia Behavioral Health Care for residential treatment services. The amendment adds $12,228 for a new contract value of $334,894. It is funded through the state of Oregon, and no general funds are involved. Go ahead, Rod.
Yes, this one's Behavioral Health Division. Approval for this amendment. An agreement with Cascadia Behavioral Health Care for residential treatment services provided to Clackamas County residents at 3 facilities within the county. This amendment adds funding for a client residing at a facility not operated by Cascadia. No general fund.
Any objections or comments? Seeing none.
Next, approval of an amendment to a contract with Line for Life for crisis line services. This amendment adds $34,151 for a contract maximum of $167,351 and is funded through the Oregon Health Plan. No general funds are involved. Go ahead, Rod.
Yes, this agreement with Lines for Life for behavioral health crisis intervention and triage call coverage services. The amendment extends the term of the contract for 3 months to allow for the completion of a formal procurement process within the county. No general fund.
Any objections? Seeing none.
Next, approval of an amendment to the intergovernmental agreement with the State of Oregon acting by and through its Oregon Health Authority for operation as a local public health authority for Clackamas County. This amendment adds a federal award amendment to the Federal Award Information Database. This contract maximum value will remain the same at $19,499,741. No general funds are involved for this amendment. Go ahead, Rod.
Yes, and this basically amends Exhibit A to add the federal award information data sheet to the actual contract. So as the administrator mentioned, there's no dollar changes. This is just paperwork that we're having to put together. No general fund involved in this.
Any objections? Seeing none. Gary?
Finally, approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the State of Oregon acting by and through its Oregon Health Authority for access to the electronic referral system, Oregon Tobacco Quit Line. The contract maximum is $40,000 and is funded through the Health Share of Oregon grant. No general funds are involved. Go ahead, Rod.
Yes, Clackamas County Public Health is partnering with Clackamas Health Centers, Multnomah County Health System, Neighborhood Health Center, and Virginia Garcia Memorial Health Center to strengthen the tobacco cessation initiative. So that's what these additional, this partnership would create for us. No general fund involved in this one.
Any objections? Seeing none.
All right, Rod, thank you very much. Next, County Council, designation of newspaper for 2021 property tax foreclosure publication. The costs are unknown and will be funded through the Assessment and Taxation's legal notices budget. Kathleen Rastetter, go ahead, please.
Afternoon, Chair Smith, Commissioners. I'm Kathleen Rastetter. This is, as you know, we file every year property foreclosure actions when delinquent property taxes reach a certain amount. It's 3 years before we can even file. Before that, we're required by statute to publish the list of foreclosed properties, and we're required to do that in a newspaper. We typically rotate the newspapers that we do, and so this is a proposal to publish this list in the Lake Oswego Review. We don't have the actual cost of what this year's publication charges would be. They come out of A&T's budget, and they're budgeted for. But we did include last year's, which was about a little over $1,000. That's what the cost was last year. It varies just because the list can vary. So some people redeem right up to the point that the list gets published. So if they redeem, we take them off, and then we get charged a little bit less. But that's the ballpark estimate, and today is just the request to approve to publish in the Lake Oswego Review.
Any objections to this? Hearing none.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'm jumping ahead to Transportation and Development. Dan, please come forward. Execution of a contract between the Department of Transportation and Development and Carl D. Cox, attorney at law, for land use decisions to be made by a hearings officer who acts on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners in conducting public hearings and issuing written decisions, applying land use regulations set forth in the Clackamas County Zoning and Development Ordinance. Contract is not to exceed $175,000 per fiscal year, with a total not to exceed the amount of $1,050,000 over a 6-year contract period. This is a mix of funding through the land use hearings officer fees, and it does include general fund. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you so much. This is one of 2 contracts. We get these contracts with various attorneys throughout the area to do hearings officer proceedings for our land use process. You will see there are 2 on the agenda today. This is the first of those 2. We did 2 to provide flexibility and to ensure we can meet the scheduling needs we have when appeals are brought forward by our community. Also, I want to make sure that we understand it's an on-needed basis or as-needed basis, so that's dictated by the public and their desire to appeal various land use decisions. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or objections? Seeing none.
All right, so the second one is the same matter. This contract will be with Joe Turner, PC, Municipal Hearings Officer, who acts on, same thing, acts on behalf of Clackamas County for land use hearings. The total amount is the same, not to exceed $175,000 per fiscal year, with a total not to exceed the amount of $1,050,000 over a 6-year contract period. This uses land use hearings officer fees and general fund.
Nothing really to add.
Any objections or questions?
I have a question. So, Dan, do we always do 2, or I thought we just did 1?
We usually do 1, but
So was the total 2 million? Or, because if I add them together, we're authorizing up to 2 million.
so they're over a 6-year period, and we did 2 because we had some scheduling conflicts in prior years, where the individual who was providing the contract services wasn't able to meet those hearing deadlines or dates. So we did 2 separate contracts to allow us flexibility in scheduling. If we have a conflict with one individual, we can schedule the other individual to come in.
Okay,
So
what-
theoretically, it's no net increase in service because it's simply just providing us alternatives for service delivery.
Right. Okay, so it's in your budget, you got basically $1 million for this, up to $1 million.
Well, it's $175,000 a year.
Per
So,
year, that's
yeah,
right.
yep.
All right. That's all, thank you.
No, seeing no other objections,
Okay,
Gary.
great, thank you, Dan. I'm jumping around again. Technology Services is next. Dave is here in the room. First, approval of a service level agreement between Clackamas Broadband Exchange and Link Oregon. There will be a non-reoccurring fee of $2,400 for the new fiber construction and pay an annual reoccurring lease of $3,060. This is funded through the Clackamas Broadband Exchange budget and then reimbursed by Link Oregon. No general funds are involved. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, yes, another customer buying fiber, paying for the build of the link, reimbursing us, and income of about $3,060 a year.
Great.
That's
Any
basi-
objections or questions for the presenter? Seeing none.
All right, next, approval of a non-disclosure agreement between Clackamas Broadband Exchange and Verizon Business Network Services. No fiscal impact. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, we do this every year with Verizon. I believe this year it's going to be a 2-year agreement. We anticipate around the first of the year to sell them 6 or 7 fiber connections, doing more business with them, and just signing this non-disclosure agreement with them so we don't talk about any of their new technology and stuff like that. It's basically what it
So
is.
why do we do this, Dave?
I'm sorry?
Why do we sell this to Verizon? What's the advantage to us on this?
Oh, it's, we do a lot of business with them. We contract through them for our phone connections, and we're also going to be contracting with them for fiber connections through the CBX. So that when we do business with them, they ask us to sign a non-disclosure statement saying we don't talk about their technology.
Okay, so cell companies are getting into the fiber business as well for internet.
Absolutely. The more the better for us.
Okay, so that means more funding, more capacity building?
Absolutely.
Yeehaw.
Trying
Any
to
other
bring
questions or
more money in.
objections? Seeing none.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dave. I'm now going back to the start of your list, and the rest of the presenters are online. First, Human Resources. This was added this morning, Commissioners. Approval of a labor contract between the County of Clackamas, between Clackamas County and the Clackamas County Peace Officers Association. Eric Serra from Human Resources, please give a quick update.
Thank you. I'm before you today to ask for your approval of the successor POA, CCPOA contract between the county and the POA. To give just a brief history, we entered negotiations on July 28th of 2020. We've reached full tentative agreement on March 30th. The CCPOA informed us on May 3rd that they had voted and to ratify the contract. With the contract itself, the fiscal impact over the life of the contract, which would be 3 years, it would retro back to July 1 of 2020, is $7,469,639. Some of the highlights of it is that the CPI index that is used to formulate cost of living increases for the CCPOA has been modified to where now all of the county is all on the same CPI index. There was some language changes just for cleanup. We did add the Juneteenth holiday, which is recognized by the county as a whole. We did include 2 additional one-time personal leave days for those individuals that are represented by the CCPOA. With special assignments, rotational detectives would get a 5% increase for the times that they are assigned through that rotational detective. The detectives that are assigned full-time to the cities of Happy Valley and or the city of Wilsonville, it's those 2 cities contract for services with the county, that those employees would receive a 5% add to pay during their time under that assignment. That 5% is actually paid by the city of Happy Valley or the city of Wilsonville, depending on what, the employees that are assigned there. The addition to a 1% add to pay for the collateral duty of forensic artist was added to the contract. Equipment that the county, that we also agreed to contribute $125 for upgrades at the time of replacement or purchase of new bulletproof vests. And then increasing the county's contribution to the legal defense fund from $4.50 to $6 per month per employee. One thing that we also added was overpayment and underpayment language in the contract, which is consistent. It was consistent with all of the contracts as well as our ordinance or our policy countywide. And that language is for in the event that an employee is overpaid, what that repayment process looks like, or if they're actually underpaid and what that make whole process looks like as well.
Any comments or questions for the presenter? Hearing none. Oh, Sonia Fisher, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Smith. It takes me a while still to find the raise hand button. So Eric, I have a question. We just got a copy of the actual contract that is, I guess, is posted now possibly, or will be, and I just pulled it up. I had understood that there was going to be a red line version sent to us.
That red line version we sent to Gary this morning, so I don't know if he had a chance to.
Yes, I did, right when you sent it, Eric.
Okay.
Oh, that's in my email somewhere?
It's in your email, and it should be online as well.
Okay. I got the one that is not redlined in front of me from an email, but I don't see the other one. Oh, my apologies. So I will take a better look at that. I don't know if I'm going to have questions after I have a chance to really look at it. The one issue that I'm interested in making sure is in there is a provision that was in a previous contract under the last Board of Commissioners, which requires our adherence to policies within the county. And I don't know, I want to make sure that that same language is in this contract.
Commissioner Fisher, I believe if you look under Article 22, sorry, I want to say it's under the miscellaneous article. I believe that there's a provision in there that requires the employees to follow all of our policies.
Okay, excellent. I will look at that. I see that's on page 39. And if I have questions, I will let Chair Smith and Administrator Schmidt know before Thursday. But if that language is in there, then I won't have any concerns.
Yeah, the language says employees shall comply with all existing rules that are not in conflict with the terms of the agreement, provided that the rules are uniformly applied and uniformly enforced.
Any further discussions or comments on this issue? Seeing none, Gary?
All right, thank you, Eric. Next, Clackamas County Sheriff's Office is item number 2 on your list, because we already did item 1 this morning. Item 2, request by the Sheriff's Office to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the State of Oregon through the Oregon Department of Transportation, Commerce and Compliance Division to provide the Sheriff's Office access to wait stations to assist with law enforcement activity. There's no fiscal impact for this. Rich from the Sheriff's Office will present. Go ahead, please, Rich.
Hey, good afternoon. This will allow us access to all the wait stations that you see specifically on the highways within Clackamas County. A good one's in Happy Valley down by Rock Creek Junction. There's a wait station. It'll allow our deputies to access the scales there in order to conduct commercial motor vehicle weight inspections, which will obviously improve roadway safety in regards to commercial motor vehicles as well as roadway deterioration.
Any objections or comments? Seeing none?
All right. Next, approval of an amendment to a contract with Star Cars for the Sheriff's Office Vehicle Installation Services. This would add an additional $560,000 with a new not-to-exceed value of $850,000 and is funded through the Sheriff's Office budget. No general funds are involved. Mike from the Sheriff's Office will present. Go ahead, please, Mike.
Good afternoon. I wanted to just clarify that, though. This amendment actually is for $150,000. Amendment number 1 on this contract, which was approved, I believe 6 years ago, was for the 560. So this amendment is only for $150,000. And as you mentioned, it's for vehicle equipment installation services. It'll run through the end of October of this year while we work with procurement on an RFP for a new contract.
Sorry for the typo, Commissioner. So it's $150,000 added to the total contract value.
Okay, and that'll be corrected by the time we
Yes, it
review
will,
this. Any objections or comments? Seeing none.
All right, thank you, Mike. Next, we're jumping ahead on your agenda to the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. Approval of a notice to renew lease agreement. Fourth Amendment extension with Phoenix Investment Group and the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District for district's maintenance shop. This lease will be for $295,968 over 3 years and will come out of the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District's general fund. No county general funds are involved. I believe Sarah Ekman is online. Go ahead, Sarah.
I am, thank you. This is exactly as Administrator Schmidt described. It's our final lease extension for an additional 3 years that allows the NCPRD maintenance operations to remain on site at its existing location through December of 2024. This location is for parks maintenance and natural resource operations. We've created efficiencies as it's centrally located and large enough for repair and maintenance of equipment, as well as allowing our loaded vehicles to be stored inside. Additionally, there is office space for staff, and that's our request.
Any objections or comments? Seeing none.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Finally, Water Environment Services. First, approval of a contract between Water Environment Services and Jacobs Engineering Group for the Kellogg Creek Water Resource Recovery Facility aeration improvements. Total contract value is $239,947 until May 1, 2022, with funding through the Water Environment Services Capital Improvements Plan. No county general funds are involved. Greg Geist, is he online?
Yes.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yes, good afternoon. So we're excited about this project. We recently completed upgrades at our Kellogg facility, including new blowers that we use through our process. And now that we have the new blowers, they're much more efficient and effective. And we're going to replace and upgrade the equipment essentially downstream from those blowers to ensure that they operate efficiently and effectively and hopefully save us some energy. This is the design and engineering piece of that next phase of the work.
Any objections or comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
Greg, when was the last time these blowers were replaced? I remember there was a problem with the blowers before, not that long ago. Was it at Kellogg or was it at Tri-Cities or both?
It was both. And they were installed, I think, shortly before I arrived. And it was a type of technology that was used in the drinking water industry that just didn't work out.
Okay, thank you.
Any other objections or comments? Seeing none.
All right, next, approval of an amendment to a contract between Water Environment Services and Metro Presort for utility bill printing and mailing services. This amendment adds an additional compensation of $350,000 for a total contract value of $1,225,000 with funding through the Water Environment Services Fund. No county general funds are involved. Go ahead, Greg.
Yes, thank you. This is a 2-year extension on a contract with Metro Presort. They're the vendor that does the printing and mailing for our billing. The original contract was from 2016, so this will extend it out to 2023. And then I believe we'll do another solicitation at that point.
Any comments?
Yes, question.
Yes.
Is that for 2-year extension?
Yes, 2-year extension, $175,000 per year.
Got it.
Any other comments? Seeing none.
All right, next, approval of a contract between Water Environment Services and Paul Brothers Incorporated for the Tri-City Water Resource Recovery Facility Mitigation Planting Project. Total contract value of $162,677 until November 1, 2021, with funding through the Water Environment Services Capital Improvements Plan. No county general funds are involved. Go ahead, Greg.
Yes, so as you may recall, we recently completed construction work on both the 82nd Drive Bridge between Gladstone and Oregon City and in our solids handling facility expansion. That property is in an environmental overlay zone, and so when we do work in those areas, we have to do environmental mitigation per the city's requirements. So this is a contract, low bid contract to get that work done.
Any comments on this? Seeing none.
All right, thank you, Greg. Congratulations, Commissioners. That is the list. Everything will go on this Thursday, June 3rd's business meeting agenda. Thank you for that. Chair, with your permission, I'd like to do one more issues item before we
Yes,
move to
please
policy
do.
sessions. This is advisory board and commission appointments. Christina, please go ahead.
So this was actually brought to issues on April 20th, and the board reviewed and approved 20 recommendations. Excuse me, I should have started. It's for the Climate Action Plan Project Community Advisory Task Force. You all came to a hearing at April 20th and confirmed recommendation for 20 members. And then you directed staff to recommend 4 final seats, and they have done that now. So these 4 final seats will be for Cassie Wilson. There is an alternate of Max Wright for that one. Zach Henkin, Katie Dunsmuir, and Valerie Pratt. And those are the 4 finalists that they selected for.
Do I see a motion?
Move for approval?
Second.
Commissioner Savas has moved for approval. Commissioner Schrader has seconded that. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Christina, please take the poll.
Okay, Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
And Chair Smith?
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Gary, what's up
Great,
next?
thank you. We'll return to issues later today between sessions. We'll start the first policy session of today. That is the board's role in processing district boundary changes. Our presenter is the County Counsel's Office, Nate Boderman, Assistant County Counsel, and Ken Martin, who is the Clackamas County Boundary Change Consultant. Today's an informational update only. Go ahead, please. Nate.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Nice to be here with you today. Well, as Administrator Schmidt alluded to, our session today is about boundary changes. You probably gathered that from the materials that we submitted. And the purpose of the session today is really intended to provide the board a brief summary of the process related to that particular type of action. These are proposals that you get on a somewhat regular basis. And instead of just throwing them at you, we thought it would be time well spent to sort of walk you through what these are all about. For those of you that have been on the board for some time, a reminder for those of you that are new to the board, perhaps just a helpful introduction to these. So one function that the Board of County Commissioners is obligated to perform, according to state law, is to review these proposals to change boundaries of special districts, those districts operating within Clackamas County. Unlike your typical role, which is really in a legislative capacity where you may be adopting or amending the county code, where you're acting in a legislative capacity or like adopting resolutions or approving contracts, things of that nature, these boundary change proposals require that you evaluate a specific application and apply criteria. So we refer to these as quasi-judicial type actions, and it's much like you'd see for like a land use application that comes before you, or like you did more recently with the ADA grievance that came before you a couple months ago. Again, this is something that appears on your business meeting agenda from time to time, and after discussing with Administrator Schmidt, we thought it would be helpful to schedule just a short session again to make sure that we're all on the same page about what these are and address any potential questions or concerns that you may have. Before turning things over, I just did want to mention that we're really only going to be addressing the types of boundary change proposals that come before you on a regular basis. These are boundary changes that are requested by property owners. I don't know, maybe Ken will discuss others, but these are requested boundary changes. They're endorsed by the district and any affected city. By and large, these are the ones that you will see appear on your agenda almost exclusively. We note in the materials that we provided for you that there's other types of boundary changes. Again, these are boundary changes where the property owner can be annexed or withdrawn from a district without their consent. These aren't common. These aren't something that have traditionally been before the board, but it's a possibility. You can be assured that if we ever did have a proposal like that, we'd brief the board to make sure that you understood the process, that you understood the potential controversy, and understood how that boundary change differ from what you normally see on your agenda. So the purpose of today is to cover sort of the routine boundary changes, isn't to be a full primer about every potential boundary change, because that just wouldn't be time very well spent, I don't think. So with that, I just wanted to introduce Ken Martin. As Gary said, Ken is our boundary change consultant and helps with the work associated with processing these types of requests. Ken has a long history with boundary changes in Oregon. Maybe that's the understatement of the day. And the associated laws and rules governing those proposals. We're certainly fortunate to have Ken available and willing to assist with these, because they're generally time-intensive proposals to take these from the beginning all the way through approval. They require pretty specialized expertise. Hopefully you gathered that from reading through some of the materials. And again, state law requires that the board process these. So if Ken weren't available to do it, it would fall to somebody else, probably myself. So I'm certainly happy that Ken's on board and that we engage him. So with that, take it away.
Thank you, Nate. Time sensitive, that's the phrase you just used, I think is one of the things that I wanted to emphasize today, and I will as I go through this presentation, because we are locked in, you're locked in by state statute and metro rules, and I'll cover that a little bit more. I do want to give you just a little brief history of boundary changes and how it got to the point where the board is actually responsible for these things. If you go back to before the turn of the century, before the turn of the 1900s, that is, the boundary changes were done by the state legislature. So if a city wanted to change a boundary, the state legislature did it. We didn't have special districts. So the legislature would get involved, and that obviously got to be cumbersome as we got more and more units, city units of government in the area. Eventually, the legislature said, no, we're going to pass a statute that says, here's how the cities can do it themselves. Around the early 1900s, you began to have development going on adjacent to cities that cities either didn't want to take on or the property owners didn't want to join the cities, but they wanted some specific service. And that service would often be water, might be fire protection, and eventually that came to be sewers. So what happened between 1900 and the early 1960s is the legislature, again, took on the task, and they formed statutes that would allow for the formation of special districts. So you had a statute that said, okay, here's the process you go through if you want to have a water district. Here's the process you go through if you want to have a fire district, et cetera, et cetera. That worked fine, and each of those statutes said, here's how you change the boundaries of this kind of district. So after we got to the mid-60s, we had about, don't quote me on this, but it was around 40 different kinds of special districts that were authorized to be formed, and they all had slightly different processes for doing their boundary changes. What the legislature decided at that point was to have some sort of uniformity of process, and they created a new statute, ORS 198, which more or less combined, the boundary change statutes of all those other special districts and said, now all special districts are going to go through this kind of uniform process, and we're going to have uniform notice, we're going to have uniform processes. At that point, the special districts were the counties were the body that was assigned the responsibility for hearing and processing those proposals. The county wasn't given a lot of discretion in terms of their ability to say no or to change the things, but they were primarily an administrative unit. And as most of you know, counties are essentially administrative units of the state, established by the state in state statute. So we got to the 60s, and that's where we were. The 60s were also a time of what we called a number of good government movements. The legislature established some interim committees, and they recommended some major changes in how government was going to operate. And one of those was the Boundary Commission. What the legislature did was to, again, pass an authorizing statute that said in any areas that meet these certain criteria, we can have a boundary commission, and the boundary commission can be the body responsible for changing the boundaries of special districts and cities for that matter. They passed the statute authorizing boundary commissions, and they actually created boundary commissions in the major metropolitan areas of the state. So there was a boundary commission in Lane County, there was a boundary commission that covered Marion Polk County, and there was a boundary commission in this area that covered Clackamas, Columbia, Multnomah, and Washington counties. That commission then, as an appointed commission, these were originally appointed by the governor, was designed to take sort of the politics out of all those kinds of boundary changes. Not have the different cities, for instance, competing for a particular property to come into the city, but rather have that decision made on the basis of criteria that were laid out in the statute about the adequacy of services, about whether the unit of government had the financial wherewithal to provide the services, those kinds of decisions, as opposed to just straight political decisions of, I want to go here because the developer in this case is going to get a better deal from Tigard than Beaverton or whatever units of government you are dealing with. So from 1969 until 1998, all the decisions on all the boundary changes for every city and every special district in these four counties here was made by the Boundary Commission. In 1998, the Boundary Commission was abolished again by the legislature, partially at the behest of some special districts which felt the commissions were a bit biased towards cities and against special districts. I could go into that, but I won't. At any rate, at that point, the commissions were abolished, and the role was dropped back to what the original statute said. And in this case, that said the county boards are going to be the processors of the boundary changes. What I'd like to do is talk about what happens when a proposal comes in. And again, as I'm doing this, I will note where there are time constraints, because I think that's really the issue for the county board when you're looking at these boundary changes. You've got certain time constraints, most of which get handled administratively by me or by Nate, but they are constraints upon you in terms of your ability to process these proposals. And it's the reason, as Nate says, for most of these fairly routine ones, you really don't have an issue. And frankly, we haven't had many non-routine ones over the course of time that I've been doing this for you. The standard, I'll just quickly go through the process. An applicant comes in and say they want to have sewer service. Usually this is a property adjacent to Happy Valley. Maybe they've already annexed to the city, and they need to get into the sewer district, into Clackamas County Service District number 1. So they will make an application. That application comes in to the county, and it's looked at in terms of whether it's complete. At this point, the proposal gets shipped to me and I start processing it, we haven't started the time constraints that we have yet because we don't have a complete proposal. One thing that has to happen with every annexation to every unit of government is it has to have a valid meets and bounds legal description and a map. And those have to be approved by the Department of Revenue in Salem. All of this is statutory requirements. The Department of Revenue in Salem reviews the meets and bounds legal description and the map, and then they give a preliminary approval. Again, we're still not in the time constraints yet. Once I get notice that they've approved that preliminarily, then I can start the clock. I can set a starting date for that proposal. And from that point forward is when the limits occur. From that point forward, a proposal must be scheduled for a public hearing in front of the county board within 30 days, between 30 days and 50 days. So it can't be scheduled for any closer than 30 days from the date we have a completed proposal, but it must be scheduled before the 50th day. So there's a window, and within that window, we have certain processes that have to happen. It's a public hearing. We have to have notice. And the statute for boundary changes says we have 3 forms of notice that have to occur. We have to notify the individual property owners around the area. We have to post notices in the area, and we have to publish notices in a newspaper of general circulation once at least 5 days before the hearing, at least 7 days before the hearing, and once at least 15 days before the hearing. So you can see these requirements begin to pile up, and mostly that's what you're paying me to do, is to try to make sure that all gets done. But it also means we have some constraints in terms of how quickly we can move on things or what we can do to change them. At the time that the Boundary Commission was abolished, the legislature gave Metro a certain role in processing the boundary changes. And so Metro has a set of rules that relate to boundary changes, some of which are similar to the state statutory ones in terms of notice, but we have to make sure that we're meeting both the state statutory requirements for notice and the Metro requirements for notice. So for instance, in the Metro Code, it says, oh, you've got to have a hearing within 45 days. Well, that fits fine with between the 30 and the 50 days, so we don't have a conflict there. At any rate, the Metro statute does require a staff report. There's nothing in the state statute that necessarily says that. There's nothing in your rules that say that, although, you know, it would be a common procedure that the county board would, of course, want to hear from the staff. So we have this requirement for the staff report, and the minimum requirement is it must be available at least 15 days prior to the hearing. We also have a requirement in the Metro rules that ask for, I lost my train of thought. At any rate, we have that requirement, and what I do is I draft that staff report. That means I've got to look at certain things that the Metro rules and the state statutes say that you should look at: the quantity and quality of services, where's the, if in this case, a sewer line, where is the sewer line? Is it adequate to handle the area? And eventually I put together a staff report. At the same time, I will draft a potential order for Nate, and attached to that order will be some findings, because all orders need findings, of course. And all of that then gets transmitted to Nate's office for his review and approval. He then, of course, has to transmit that to the clerk, and eventually it gets to the board. Those things are done fairly quickly now that we have a lot of data processing that we didn't have in the old days. But still, it takes time to transmit those things and to make sure they all happen. Once the once it gets to the public hearing, you review it. You do hold a public hearing. You open it. Once in a great while, there is someone who will appear at the hearing. I don't think I can remember a time when we've had people appear in opposition, but sometimes at least they have questions or they've seen a notice posted and they have an issue. We usually attempt to handle those ahead of time. If somebody contacts me and says, oh, I got this issue, then I'll try to deal with it and have it worked out before it ever gets to the board. But eventually you hold your public hearing, and usually after that you will make a decision. That means you've adopted an order. Now there's post-processing that goes on with that proposal. That order must be resubmitted to the Department of Revenue for their final approval, and usually because they've given a pre-approval, that's not a problem. Sometimes it is. I would note that particularly with the pandemic that we've been dealing with, the processing times for getting the Department of Revenue to approve or give preliminary approval or final approval is often stretched out to 2, 3, 4 months. They're working at home as well, so we don't always have these things done in an expeditious manner. But after the order is adopted, I send it back down to the Department of Revenue. They give their final approval, and then it must go to Metro. Metro is charged with finally sending that order out to the Secretary of State's office, the elections office, the assessor's office, because these are boundary changes, and one of the reasons that we're changing boundaries is to make sure we know who is getting the benefit of the services from that district and who's paying for them and who gets to vote if there's an election. So it's really important that those processes happen and that that order gets out to those various departments. The most important one is the Secretary of State's office, because no boundary change is officially approved until the Secretary of State's office receives and stamps that proposal. So that's the kind of basic process that each of these annexations go through, and it's with those time limits in there that can cause a problem. We've been pretty lucky and been able to go through pretty regularly with these things. We don't have a lot of controversy, and therefore we usually don't get pressure from the applicants, but sometimes there is a development proposal involved and they will be wanting to make sure they're going to get on the next available agenda, et cetera, and I usually try to work that out as best I can with the clerk's office and with Nate to make sure those things happen. So the bottom line is that the county is performing this function. They're performing it essentially as an extension of the state. You have some pretty severe limits in terms of your timing for performing that function, but fortunately, as Nate said, we don't have a lot of controversial proposals, and so they go through fairly expeditiously. I think I'd be happy to answer questions, or we can discuss anything further.
Do we have any questions or comments for the presenters on boundary issues? Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, actually, this is something that was actually going to come up under our issues. So we have been asked by Parks District in Canby, which is not just Canby, but the surrounding area, to actually reduce its boundaries to be just the city boundaries. And evidently, there's a process to go through. The people that have been working on this for a while have contacted me and said that they have everything that they were told to do, all their ducks in a row, including, approval of the city, an actual description of the city, so all those pieces. And I know that Chris Story had worked on this issue prior to you, Mr. Boderman, and things weren't quite, didn't have all their ducks in a row.
Right.
Is that any different if they were to come, that's a totally different situation than some of what you just described. It's like a district trying to reduce its boundaries as opposed to annexing into a district. Is there anything fundamentally we could be missing with trying to work through something like this?
It is the same, and yet it's different. That is, processing-wise, it's still a responsibility of the board,
Okay,
but it's called a withdrawal instead of an annexation. And there are some slightly different rules relating to the withdrawal. And I guess I would also just add that, and Nate may confirm this, if we're dealing with this particular issue, which I can remember from the past,
right.
we probably wouldn't try to treat it as just an ordinary proposal that would go through very expeditiously. I know there was controversy over this, and we may certainly, when we got to the point of actually having a formal proposal, I think we'd want to work with the board to make sure that we had a
Yeah.
process that was going to be acceptable to all.
The difficulty was that they hadn't gotten, supposedly what I've been told is they have gotten all those pieces worked out now. But I just want Mr. Boderman to be aware that that may come up again. And we probably don't have to talk about this under issues now, because that was one of the things I'm going to bring up. So it would be good to have you talk to them and see if they, and look at what Mr. Story had done and see indeed if they've met those qualifications, because that's their ask, is to reduce the boundary of their parks district, which does not have a tax base at all. So it's just a matter of them doing whatever legal process they need to have done. So it can, I believe so it can come before us. But, so I don't know, Mr. Boderman, if you're familiar with this one or not. But,
Yeah, I mean, it's been a couple of years since we had
Yeah.
those meetings on this. My recollection of the time, there was a issue with the sufficiency of the information associated with the application, mostly the meets and bounds description, getting the Department of Revenue to sign off on the withdrawal territory. But I'll also note that this is, what Ken's described and what you typically see are proposals where all the property owners have consented to the annexation or the withdrawal, as it may be. Just given the amount of property and land that would be subject to the withdrawal, I'd be very surprised if every single property owner signed off on it. And so you'd be in a situation where you'd have an involuntary action affecting somebody's property, which is atypical, again, of what we typically see. It would be the same process, but potentially with controversy. And so we'd certainly take it under advisement, brief the board appropriately, and move it through the process. I mean, it's something that the board would be compelled to decide if a valid petition was put before you. So you don't have a decision whether to proceed or not. It's just, the conditions under which you process it.
Yeah, they feel it's to the benefit to reduce the district because it will be within the city where they have recreational parks. They have a very robust program for sports for children, and they've never been able to pass a tax base because the folks in the country already feel that they live in a park, which is partially, in a sense, true. So they wanted to reduce it to be more of a focus more on sports and, soccer fields and baseball fields, those kinds of things. So I hope we can at least get another bite at that apple for them and see what we can do. So,
I have a question on that. If you're withdrawing from a boundary, as in Canby's case, and not an annexation, do you redraw boundary lines, or do you go back to what it was historically?
that's a good question.
In Canby's case, are they asking to draw new boundaries, or do we know?
They wanted to use the boundaries of the city itself, and I would suspect those boundaries probably have changed through the years. There's been annexations.
So then, so if that's the case, it would be new boundary lines, and it would not be a withdrawal. Technically speaking, if I heard what you said right, I don't know.
That's a very interesting point.
Well, that's
I
for
do
you
know
guys
the-
to figure out.
Yeah. The boundary lines were an issue there because they wanted to use they wanted to say just the city boundary on a certain date, and Department of Revenue wouldn't accept that. They wanted a meets and bounds description. Mm-hmm. They couldn't use the meets and bounds description of the city when it was originally formed because there had been lots of annexations since that time. So that was one of the bugaboos they were facing. And now whether they've dealt with that or not, I don't know.
I think that's why they called back, because they feel that like they have, and they do have a new city, well, they have a city manager that actually used to head our North Clackamas Park and Rec District, who probably has some more knowledge of that. And I believe that they've got their city council on board. You know, this is what they've been telling me. So, yeah, I think it's doable, but there's still the details to be worked out.
Right.
Okay. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, so if I recall right, this is the district that has no tax income, no tax base, is that correct?
Yeah.
So my question is, from a process standpoint, and over the years, elections, everyone else, they have not been able to receive any revenue or compensation for all the work, including our work to this day. So is there a plan to rectify all the incurred expenses should this become a drawn-out, expensive venture?
I don't think,
Anyone know?
as far as I know, that's one of the questions that conversations we have to have with them. Because yes, they would try and do elections and it would incur cost in our clerk's office and the elections office, and they were never compensated for that.
Yep, I don't know what the total is as of yet since the formation of the district, but, you know, there has been, I believe, as I understand it, no compensation for
Right.
years and years and years. That's something that needs to be rectified.
That must be, that's probably something that should be taken up with the city of Canby, and they should make their council aware of that, the district board.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner Scholl?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Martin, for a very informative briefing. Did you say when the work on your current contract would be completed?
My current contract,
Current contract? Do we have an idea when that work's going to be completed? Nathan?
Well, I believe we renew this annually, is that correct? Or
Right.
it's,
Okay.
yeah, and so Ken's been a consultant for, I don't know how many years now, certainly as long as I've been here. And it's work that we pay on a contract hourly basis, basically to process. We don't have any control over the applications that are submitted. And so I think a large function of the cost is just, we're at the mercy of whoever is choosing to annex at that time.
I see, thank you.
yes, that's correct.
Any other questions or comments for the presenters? Thank you. Gary?
Thank you very much, Ken and Nate. And let us follow up with the city of Canby. As far as I know, they've not reached out to staff yet, so let me reach out to the city manager to get more details, and I'll report back to you, commissioners, on that parks request. All right, next is performance review of the county administrator and county council. This will be led by me and Stephen. This was a request by the board to discuss the process for how to review the performance evaluations for the county administrator and county council. In your policy session packet, there's at least a 10-year history of how the county has reviewed the county administrator and county council prior. Just very quickly, let me summarize. From approximately 2011 through 2017, the human resources director led the process. That person would collect feedback from commissioners, from peers and subordinates, provide a 360-degree review, share that with the board and the administrator or the council, as well as help prepare goals for each individual. An executive session discussion was held where the goals were discussed and the performance of the administrator or the council, and then a decision in public was made if a salary merit award was approved or not. Next, in 2017 to 2018, the board decided to hire an external contractor to run the review process. This contractor did all the work. They prepared a 360-degree review. They helped establish goals with the administrator and the council. The goals were influenced by Performance Clackamas, the core values, and the actual results of the 360-degree review. There was a discussion in executive session where performance was discussed. The consultant provided all the documentation and collected all the feedback. And then ultimately in public, a decision was made if any salary increases were awarded or not. The consultant in this last time cost $11,025 for the first year and $8,820 for the second year. In 2019, the Board of Commissioners decided to change the process again, return to an in-house process with no consultant. The Human Resources Department led this review process again, but this time the Workforce Planning and Development Manager led the process. The county followed the Clarify, Converse, Capture performance evaluation process, which was started in 2019 and is a process for which all county employees are now given performance evaluations. And very quickly, clarify means at the start of a 12-month period, goals are established for the employee. Converse is at least once a month, there is a performance conversation on how the employee is doing, and feedback is provided by the manager. And finally, capture, where at the end of the 12-month process, a written review is conducted of the employee. So the board did agree to follow that same process for the administrator and council as well. The performance evaluation and any pay increases were separated, so that the review happened at one period, and then 6 months later, the salary increase or not would be discussed. Rather than a 360-degree tool, the administrator and council were able to use data from their performance Clackamas department surveys or ask human resources to conduct a 360 if the administrator or council agreed. The HR department workforce manager compiled all the information, presented to the board in executive session, and then any salary increases were made in public. So that has been the process over the last 10 years. You can see it's kind of been all over the place. It's been a little bit different depending on the preference of the board. So today, commissioners, we're simply asking you, which process would you like to follow? Either of those that I have described or a new process entirely. There's several attachments to your policy session report that goes over some of the things I discussed today in more detail. Stephen, would you like to add anything to that summary?
No, Gary, you did a great job. I'm here to answer any questions that the board might have.
Well, board, and two of them are, Martha's missing. I previously asked that we send this process outside our HR department because I feel that it's very difficult for people to review their boss's performance. And I asked at that time that we bring in a totally neutral third-party entity and look at it from a more global perspective, keeping personalities and all that kind of stuff and previous discussions and keeping all that kind of influence out of it. But to make it a very black and white, these are your duties, did you perform them? If not, yes, if not, why? That type of situation. And my board said no. So board, with that in mind, what do you want? And I think it's difficult to have this discussion publicly with these two people in the room. I don't know that it's fair to them. So I'm waiting for opinion.
Well, Chair, I've been through this quite a bit, and, I'd be frank, I'm just leaning towards option one because we have changed it, and I believe we've improved it from where we once were. If we get to a point where we have or cite a specific problem or have a different level of discipline to follow through with improvements or ideas, then I would certainly welcome those, but I'm just trying to identify what the problem is we're trying to solve.
Well, I just stated what the situation was, Mr. Savas.
I heard.
And it takes the personalities out of it. It takes our HR department out of trying to evaluate their bosses, in this case, one boss, and put it, I believe, in a more fair light. Originally, I thought my request was fairly simple and straightforward, but evidently it's not. I too have been through this process 4 times. I remember how it was. And frankly, I don't know that it is the BCC's expertise necessarily in evaluating personnel and performance. We do have expectations of these two gentlemen on their jobs, and it oftentimes gets hectic and confused, and we're juggling balls, and sometimes decisions need to be made fast, and sometimes things are confusing, and today is a perfect example of that, just one day in many, many days. And so I wanted a more quantifiable process that we can hang our hats on. And frankly, I listened to last year's process, and I did not like it whatsoever. I just not think it was fair. For instance, the county administrator went through, what, a couple hours, and then Stephen Madcore came up and he was done in 10 minutes. I mean, I'm exaggerating, okay? And I do not feel last year's process was fair. I would just like to look at something new. And then we use it every year. And we do have a new board. And we do have a new chair. So that's what I would like to do. I think we can take our time with this. These guys aren't going anywhere.
We hope not.
Yes.
Well, this year, you might recall, I submitted something to the commissioners, which was basically the code provision applicable to county council, what the code says the obligations of county council are. I set that forth out in detail. I also listed the accomplishments of the office over the course of the last year, and I know that there was opinions about self-assessments, but I would direct the board's attention to what HR compiled about how other counties and jurisdictions do it. And it looks like the starting point on a lot of them is it's self-assessment. And then we did goals and expectations moving forward for the next year. And then I would encourage the board to take a look at that document that I circulated. And if you were to have your own expectation or performance goals and things along those lines, you would have a whole section for yourself to include in there. And I submit that this is a group that oversees a $1 billion budget. We have 2,200 employees that you essentially are in control of. You just negotiated a POA labor negotiation. You do that every single year. We have a lieutenant colonel. We have a former state legislator, hazelnut farmer, current chair. We have an epidemiologist from Cornell. We have a longstanding business owner. We have a lawyer over there. I submit you people are more than capable of giving a performance evaluation of the only 2 employees that you have direct oversight. And if you can't have frank, candid talks with us, then there's something wrong with this relationship. And I think that you can, and I think that you might be struggling with some of the delicacies and sensitivities. But Chair Smith, you've talked frankly to me for a number of years, and I suggest and I encourage you to do so in the future. Same with all of you. So I would encourage it. I would prefer to have it stay in-house. I think we don't need somebody, you don't need to pay somebody $30,000 to tell you that your process is perfectly fine.
Well, it wouldn't be 30,000, I can guarantee you, Stephen. That's an exaggeration. Gary Schmidt, what's your comment?
Stephen and I are both on employment agreements. We serve at your pleasure. You could tell us right now, thank you for your service and goodbye, and we're done. So honestly, you don't need a performance evaluation. You get to decide, or the majority of you get to decide our future on a daily basis. However, if you're not satisfied with our performance, tell us. And I agree with Stephen. You're all very frank with me anyway, and I respect that and appreciate that. You tell me what you'd like me to do better or different, and I listen to that, and I mostly do it. I always do it. I agree. And Evelyn, if you'd like to speak, you're welcome to come forward. Evelyn, our HR director, is here.
Lawrence to come forward and give your opinion, please.
It does put pressure on Evelyn because Evelyn reports to me, and I will say she doesn't come up with the evaluation. She just coordinates it in her staff.
Well, as a coordinator, Gary, now listen. As a coordinator, we need to hear from her. I know she reports to you.
I wanted to finish what I said, Chair. Would you let me finish what I said, please?
Okay.
So Evelyn could give you her feedback right now on the impacts to her, and please speak frankly, as you always do to me. I'm here I serve at your pleasure. I'm just looking for a decision. Stephen's review is overdue, and mine's not till August. So we just need a process that we know what you agree with. And yes, it's a new board, and this board should decide. You should not be tied to what prior boards had to say. Thank you, Evelyn.
Are you ready?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I think that the process, is it not on?
Yeah, just speak directly into that. It's kind of difficult with our masks on to be heard.
Okay. Frankly, I think that the current process is fine. I think that I would keep it in-house as well. I think that there are some tweaks that we can make to the existing process to make it not as awkward. I know that you expressed a concern about being able to see past performance in the personnel record. What we haven't done is collected the actual evaluation discussion, and that's being recorded on a tape. And we certainly can, I see some tweaks that can be made there where we could have that tape transcribed and discussions that have taken place during your performance evaluation be summarized and placed into the personnel file. That would need to be contracted out because my staff, we don't have the capacity to transcribe the tape from the meeting. So I think that again, I agree with Stephen and Gary's comments that having this done internally and the fact that you have an ongoing working relationship, I would hope that you would be able to have those open and frank conversations at any given time when you believe if they're meeting your expectations or if they're not meeting your expectations. There are things, again, that we can do to improve the process. I would suggest if you want more feedback in Gary's case, Gary has direct reports, which is all of the county department directors. If you would like to have input from us, how Gary is doing, certainly that's something that Sherry could resume doing, sending out a survey to department directors to get feedback. Stephen doesn't have direct reports like Gary and counties. His is internally within his department. So their jobs are real different. But again, giving an overview, a summary, a self-evaluation is important. I do it with my staff. I ask them how they feel they've been doing in the job. I collect feedback from their customers. It's summarized. I take a summary document and I actually summarize their performance over the year, and it goes in their personnel file. So the next time their review is due, I go back and I look at what was documented last year. And that is missing from this piece. But again, we can fix that very easily. I don't have anything else to add.
Any other tweaks, Evelyn, that you would like to add to that?
I'm sorry?
Any other tweaks that you would like to add to that?
I would probably make sure that it's happening on a regular basis to really clarify the roles, who's responsible for what. So who has responsibilities within county administration? In Gary's case, he has an administrative services manager. You know, there may be a role that individual plays in terms of making sure it's on the calendar and information being brought. I'm just throwing that out as a suggestion. Stephen is different. But again, I think the scheduling of when their reviews are done, that should be done within your own prospective areas. HR doesn't necessarily need to do that. We certainly have a role in reviewing the salary review every year. And so at the time that both individuals' performance evaluations are due, we would then present where they are in terms of their salary and recommend what would be the next steps in terms of compensation. It's really up to the incumbents in the job if whether or not you want to have customer feedback or not. I think a lot of that information, we're already collecting it through performance management. And so it's kind of redundant to do another performance or customer feedback. Stephen gets that through MFR. And so I don't know that he's going to get different information. So that's something you can think about. But I really don't have anything new to add.
So are you saying that you would manage this process for us?
So when you say manage, we would help coordinate it. Work, when I say
Then- so
coordinate,
who's the manager?
defining the roles.
So who's the manager then? So who's the manager? Who would lead the discussions, the chair?
The chair. I believe that the chair should manage those, handle those discussions.
Commissioners, comments? Christina, we have, was it Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah. The one piece that we had when I was new on the commission is what is called a 360, where there was a survey that went out externally to folks, and we had that information for the county administrator, which I really liked. And so I would really like to see that included for both the county administrator and the county attorney. And I think that is good because, and especially for county council, there's a lot of work that county council does that we as commissioners don't ever see. And there were many times that I had heard praise from colleagues of mine in the legal field, and I just really wanted some official way for that to be put into Stephen's performance evaluation. And there wasn't really that opportunity built into the system. So that would be my only tweak to this process. I see that there is a incumbent selects questions to be included in survey of direct reports, but I think it should be beyond direct reports to more community.
Then we'll hear from all the commissioners on this. Commissioner Scholl, you're up next.
Yes. Performance evaluations need to be based on observed performance. Performance needs to be based on performance criteria. My question is to Mr. Schmidt and Mr. Medical, are the criteria for your job performance clearly identified so that when it comes to evaluation time, there's a correspondence between that evaluation and what you're expected to perform? The other thing is that it's difficult to do an annual evaluation without a mid-year kind of pat on the back or adjustment or some sort of talk, because if you wait till the end of the year to do the complete evaluation, there could be surprises, or that could be all positive. So my question is, are those performance criteria clear enough so that when the evaluation comes, there's going to be some rational correspondence there?
I think they are, Commissioner Scholl. I think they're both laid out in code, both for the county administrator, what the expectations are of the board with that position, as well as with county council. For example, oversee all civil litigation, manage the office, keep the board fully apprised, provide direct advice to department heads, districts, all elected officials, things along those lines. Gary has a similar thing, administrative policies, you're the budget manager, you're the district manager, you manage the office. He also has to keep the board fully apprised. So I would say the code's the best starting point as to what the expectations are for either position.
Okay.
I also have about, I think, 18 goals the board and I came up with collectively last year for my review, which I've been working on all year. I certainly can resend them to commissioners because you've not, well, Tootie and Mark, you've not seen them. Tootie has. Mark, you've not seen them. But I have been working on those as well. So I do answer your question, yes, I feel I have a pretty good standard of how you.
That's fine. You can send those out again, Gary. And, I will direct the board's attention to page 8 in the packet. And I believe this was written by HR, if that's correct, meeting the expectations of the position. There's some items listed here as to timing, additional input, internal survey, customer service survey, documentation, and salary review. Under salary review, it says the month prior to the incumbent salary review date, da-da-da-da. Basically, what it's saying, if I'm reading this correct, the salary is done after the evaluation? Is that right,
That
Evelyn?
is correct.
Okay, I do not believe that was done last time around, correct?
That was done last time around.
It was done at the same time, wasn't it?
No.
It was not?
I think
Okay,
it was
good.
afterwards.
All right.
It was afterwards.
Or separate.
Okay, thank you. Well, then I remembered that wrong. So commissioners, what do you want to do? It's up to you.
Well, I stated my thoughts earlier. I'll stand by that. I'll just add that the nature of legal counsel's process versus and the time spent on that versus that of the administrator is less than the administrator. The administrator has a lot of departments and people he manages directly, and less so for the legal counsel. So it's been my experience here that, it's always been easier and briefer to work with legal counsel and do that evaluation than it is the administrators. So that should not be any reflection of their performance. They're still here. I've always given them positive scores, and so I don't. Again, my earlier statement, I think option one, we can, if you have some particular tweaks, I'm open to that, but I just don't see, again, us having the going through this again. I've just been through it so many times.
Okay, Paul, but with that in mind, I have heard that then I manage the process as the chair. Now, that's what I heard that was my duties in that. You say you want to do this, do you accept the fact that I will be managing the process? I guess that my commissioners, if you want to do it like you've always done it, then you would need to accept the fact that I am managing the process, of which I said I was willing to be open-minded to the process and allow for a different process. But if you want me to do it, guess what? I'll do it. I mean, I like these two guys. But I think with some tweaks are in order, and I think, Evelyn, you can come to my office, and since I'm going to manage the process the way it sounds, I don't hear any other ideas coming forth. You need to make an appointment and come in, and you and I are going to sit down, and we're going to tweak the process. I think maybe a survey is in order. Now, if we did a survey, is that the 360?
That's the 360.
Does your office conduct that?
We have conducted that in the past.
Okay. Now, the questions asked, do they change? Are they the same the year after year?
The questions have pretty much been the same from year to year when we've conducted them, and they're all job-related. And as Stephen has pointed out, that the questions are really centered around their job descriptions. The county administrator as well as county council does have a job description, and the job description does outline the major areas of responsibility, and we have taken the questions, developed the questions around those key functions, essential functions in their job.
Well, that would make sense, yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
job performance, that's what we're talking about here.
And when we said the process, my recommendation would be is that you would be conducting the performance discussion that happens between the two incumbents, that HR would not be conducting that discussion. You would lead that amongst your colleagues.
And then what we could do, once we have the process and questions put together, we would put it out to the commissioners for their review. Is that what happens? Or no?
We haven't done that in the past because
Well,
we had a survey,
asking.
but we can do that, yes.
All right.
We
don't know
use
if-
SurveyMonkey, and we use a SurveyMonkey, and Sherry Reedman has been conducting those surveys.
Well, if it's the same questions we've always asked, then commissioners probably don't need to see them, I'm guessing. Commissioner Scholl?
I have no more
Oh,
questions.
yeah, I thought it was light on. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, so I was speaking, I did have the floor, and then you threw a question at me. I guess it was a rhetorical question and didn't give me the opportunity to, number one, finish my train of thought, nor actually respond to the question. So as far as the question, I think as you stated back to me was, are you okay if I manage it? So I think it's really the definition of manage. I would say that all the chairs past have, by the role of the chair, have managed the process. I'm not looking at some change or expansion of management or some other design. I think it's up to the chair to make sure that it's on the agenda. It's up to the chair to make sure that we're using staff, HR, to coordinate and put everything together and make sure. I mean, that's how I look at management. I don't look at management in some more complex matter.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, Paul kind of stole my thunder. I think that it's a definition of manage, and I think HR would be managing the information, gathering all of that for us, but the chair would lead the discussion. I would suggest my position would be to use the process as is with the addition of the external input, which I believe is defined as a 360. So that would be my only suggestion of moving forward. And we can see how it goes this year, and if we need to make further changes, we could.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, so let me just, if I can, just respond to Commissioner Fisher. So one of my discomforts with some 360 processes, and I think that we were at that point at one time, was that how much we weighted the external input, right? I mean, how much weight do you put on that? And, we saw some minor little, I thought, I won't say abuses, but I thought some people, whether it was revenge or whatnot, but small little, quirks here and there over time. So if it's really, I guess I won't say question, and I don't want to put Evelyn on the spot any more than me. Perhaps she already feels, with great respect. And that is that are there other ways of gathering input, external input, that's not, quote, a 360?
Yeah, there are other ways to get input. I want to first address, if I may, the 360 that we've conducted. So there was a 360 survey feedback that was conducted by HR Answers. And that survey that was done, it was much more sophisticated, and that's where the weighting was assigned to certain questions. When we discontinued the contract with HR Answers, HR did conduct a survey feedback from stakeholders, but it was not a weighted survey. It was just, what do you think? How is the incumbent performing these particular tasks? And it was a scale, maybe 1 to 5, yeah. And so it was just 1 to 5, 5 being outstanding, 1 poorly. And then comments were written. So it was really very simple, and there was no weighting assigned to it. So what you got was how it was rated, the average, and then written comment. And we only collected feedback from the county administrator. We did not collect feedback on county council because, again, their jobs being so different, Gary has oversight over departments, and Stephen provides advice. And so we did not do a customer 360 for county council because we use the MFR survey results to get customer feedback. So that's what we've done. So I need clarity as to, if you want to do that, what is it that we're wanting to do? Because you're getting feedback through MFR, and departments are surveyed to give feedback regarding the service that they're getting. County council, just like HR, every year a survey is done on our service, and customers are asked to rate the delivery of it. So that's one way. We can certainly do the 360. That's just an instrument in getting the feedback. Kim, do you have any other suggestions? In terms of.
You articulated the difference between the HR Answers and then the simplified format that HR shared used for the survey, and I think there were only 5 questions on it.
Yeah, it's really simple.
So it's fairly simple and straightforward in gathering feedback.
And it's a closed session, so we can't have people come in to the executive session to give feedback. So we really only have 2 options of getting feedback, either through MFR, which all county departments are surveyed about the quality of customer service. And I can't speak to the county administrator on that one. I can only speak to county council because Stevens mirrors what we do in HR. And then the 360, where Gary is asking feedback from his direct reports of how he's doing. We did ask for, when HR Answers was administering the survey, we solicited actually names. So who did you want in the community that you wanted to get feedback from? And HR Answers did that, but we did not do that in HR.
So am I hearing then there's going to be a different process for both these positions?
That's not what I'm saying. The process is the same. I think what would be different is the survey. So how do we want to collect how do we want to collect the information? What adds most value to you? If you're wanting to get feedback, because their jobs are different. Stephen's job it mirrors HR. And so the work that he does, that he provides the county, that information, if county council isn't meeting the expectations of departments, we're going to know about it through the survey that is administered through MFR. Gary is different. He has direct reports, county department directors. And I'm not sure, do we do a survey for county administration?
County administration used to do an MFR survey, but we ended it about a year ago.
Okay.
So for me, it was 360 reviews.
Yeah, so that's the difference. Their jobs are different. And I think it's okay, if you're asking me, if it's a problem having two separate ways to collect information on how well the incumbents are performing their jobs, I think that's fine to have two separate, because the jobs are different.
Yes, they are, yes, and statutorily, their jobs are defined by law. And I suppose it's up to the commissioners what weight they put on the MFR or the 360. We do not need to determine that ahead of time. Commissioners, is that correct, or am I incorrect?
You're correct.
Well, I think what I take away from Evelyn's options there is, doing a non-weighted survey or 360 versus a one that is weighted, essentially, and I would favor the non-weighted external survey, whether or not you want to quote 360 it, put a process, that's fine, whether you want to do the 360 internal with internal staff or hire someone to do the 360 external, I would prefer that we just manage that or coordinate that.
Yeah, I don't know the difference between what weighted and non-weighted is. I just like having feedback, external feedback from the community in helping us to evaluate.
Well, I suppose if it was weighted, we would have a score. And, we'd have, for instance, 10 attributes, and each 1 to 10, and 10 being the highest. And we could take a numeral value from a weighted survey and say, okay, in this column, Gary gets a 5, and in this other column, Gary gets a 10. And we would add it up. So I don't necessarily, so that's what I'm trying to figure this out. I don't want to get, if I'm going to be leading this discussion, which you all say it's okay for me to do, I don't get halfway through this and get sideways. And so I'm giving you all input right now on how you want to proceed on this. Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, I think that you and Evelyn, just to kind of move this along, should get together to tweak this. And I do think there seems to be a consensus that you manage this. I'm fine with that. And I will tell you from past experience from years ago, this is a much more professional, directed process than when I first came here.
Good.
It was actually frighteningly, in some ways, loosey-goosey. So, yeah, no, it was loosey-goosey. And not that I'm going to disparage what happened in the past, but this we have professionalized through the years in a way that we weren't as professionalized back when we were down by the railroad tracks with the train going by and the building shaking and all that kind of stuff. So I think that we're on a good track, and it has been I can't even tell you what the improvement has been. It's been
Well, I'm willing
just
to
night
go
and
down
day.
that, but I'm going to ask my board, I'm going to have Evelyn come in, make your appointment, as soon as we can. I'm going to ask for an additional help on this with me, and I'm going to ask Nancy Bush if she would be willing to also sit in on our initial process meeting on this, and help us formulate what we need to do moving forward.
And if you're okay, I'd like to also have Kim LaGlory, who is my manager over our workforce planning and development, if she can attend that meeting as well.
I think that is marvelous.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? We're going to move forward. Oh, and I also am going to request that these reviews be done on separate days for each person.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, because I don't think it was before.
Well,
Okey-doke.
the anniversary dates kind of define that
Well,
anyhow.
Yeah, I know that, Paul, and maybe we can move Stevens along further, but we've had some extenuating circumstances. Stephen Madcore, I do apologize to you for that we missed your anniversary date.
No worries, Chair.
Can I buy you a cupcake?
Please.
All right.
Chocolate.
Okay. Gary, what's up next?
All right, next is American Rescue Plan Act payments update and seeking board feedback. We have staff from Public and Government Affairs, Finance, County Administration to present. Trent, Nancy, and Elizabeth. Please go ahead.
All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners, and thank you, Administrator Schmidt. So today we're going to talk to you about ARPA. It's the American Rescue Plan Act. We have called it ARPA here. I'm not sure if anyone else is doing that, but we are. So today we're going to discuss those issues and some of the things that you would like to see in regards to ARPA as well. So I just want to mention, I know that there was a lot that happened while I was out on vacation, but I just want to kind of remind you, because you've done the budget in between. So the guidance is interim. The comment period is open until July 9th. So as we move forward, we need to remember that. And as Elizabeth mentioned a couple of weeks ago, that the guidance presented is not as broad as we thought it was going to be. So everything has to be tied to COVID, which I know Stephen Madcore also mentioned that this morning as well. We also know that the water and wastewater portion of the guidance is going to have additional information because they have already told us that. So we don't know everything that's going to be in that particular portion either. So today we're going to discuss the need for the ARPA dollars to be used starting on July 1st for the EOC, vaccine, and the contact tracing. So this will replace the CARES dollars that we have now, which is ending at the end of this month. Currently, we are running $300,000 to $600,000 a month through the EOC, depending on what is going on. We are seeing that decline, of course, as more and more people get vaccinated, but that is kind of the average at this point. We'll talk about businesses, and Sarah Ekman will join us for that conversation. We know that you have interest in what's going to be going out to the businesses and what is going out now. So we'll have that conversation. And also to talk to you a little bit about criteria. The group is working on criteria for nonprofits, businesses, and those types of things for whenever they send in applications. And we want to make sure that we're hitting everything that the commissioners think we should hit in that criteria. So I'm going to turn it over to Trent, who's going to talk about the guidance and also the survey results that we have so far. Trent?
Thank you very much. So Nancy, you did a lot of great work there on covering the guidance, and really it's just that a lot has changed in terms of when we initially heard about the money, when it was initially passed in Congress. The phrase very flexible was in use, it was in vogue, and when the interim final guidance came out in May, a lot of that flexibility was reduced, and everything orbits around COVID-19. Naturally, that's why they passed the bill. There are some areas of flexibility within that guidance, but that's still to be determined. It's still interim guidance. A lot of that commentary period that Nancy mentioned up until July 9 will be seeking more clarification around some of those bits and pieces. And so we know that there are already questions that we have that are missing from the guidance that we would like more clarity on. We're sort of drafting a prep list that we could potentially comment on unless we hear that the Association of Oregon Counties or NACO are already pursuing some of those questions. So we're looking for those resources who might have similar questions as us for opportunities to get clarity in the guidance. But it still sticks to the principles of the bill itself. And in your packet, there's a sort of a soft PowerPoint that's provided by NACO. It covers a variety of uses of the funding that are within the guidance. There are 6 primary categories, and that's support for public health response, addressing negative economic impacts, replacing public sector revenue loss, premium pay for essential workers, water and sewer infrastructure, and broadband infrastructure. So those are the 6 primary categories. And with the interim final guidance that came out in May, they also added another equity category that sort of expands new opportunities that were within the guidance to sort of address the hardest hit communities of the pandemic. So it opened that up a little bit more to create, again, a little bit of flexibility, but still everything revolves around COVID-19, and that's our starting place right now until the guidance actually finalizes. The other thing that came out with the guidance is some reporting requirements, and so we know that some of those are coming starting in August, at the end of August. There are 2 at the end of August and 1 in October, and so this money will be tracked very closely. The U.S. Treasury Department will be auditing the users of these funds, and that includes us. So at a very high level, that's what we know that's new to the guidance. And in your packet is a fact sheet from the Treasury that provides more details than what I just provided for, but I know that we have a long time here, and we want to hear from y'all on more of that. So here to answer questions for that, at least initially for the guidance and introduction, and I can jump into the survey when you're ready.
Any questions? Shall we just dive into the survey?
Let's dive into it.
Yeah, Trent, you want to go ahead with that?
Thank you very much. So, seeing the urgency for using these funds and knowing that there's a lot of interest in how these funds get pushed out to the county, we thought it was very important to initiate the public process here. And with y'all's guidance, and I think y'all saw the questions before we pushed it out, we ran the survey, which is an unscientific survey, through the month of May. And of course, the guidance came out, the interim guidance came out in the middle of the survey, so it changed a little bit some of the survey answers. But the good news is it really gave us a lot of valuable information about what's valuable to the residents of Clackamas County. It's the 2nd largest response to any survey that the county has published from PGA. So we were really proud of the results there. 3,621 people responded to the survey, and 3,280 of those people were from Clackamas County. So we had a few respondents who were outside of the county. Since we published the preliminary survey analysis in the packet last week, we closed the survey last night, the end of the month of May. We have not done an update on the preliminary survey, so I don't have that final delivery for you. We'll have that here at the end of the week, but we only had an additional 40 or so responses. So because we had over 3,000 responses, that's a pretty marginal gap. The high-level summary of what's in the preliminary analysis is, I think, still pretty dependable for what you've already seen. We received 45 responses to a Spanish-translated survey of the same questions, and 11 responses to a Russian-translated survey. And we are still analyzing those because those also just closed last night and are translated, so we have to do a little bit of extra work there. That'll be part of our final report. Again, that's all still preliminary. The intent of this, of course, was to just take the pulse of the public. Where are your values as it relates to what we knew at the time of the intent of the COVID-19, ARPA dollars? And then I want to reemphasize it's an unscientific survey. We chose that route over a scientific survey because it was more cost effective. We could get the information out more quickly, get the public response a lot more quickly. And Commissioner Fisher, about a month ago when we started the survey, you asked would we be reaching out to older community within Clackamas County, and I'm pleased to report that over 39% of respondents were over the age of 55, and then 22% were over the age of 65. So we actually got a really great response from the older community who were taking the survey, I feel.
How about over 75?
We did not track that question, but I appreciate it. And very quickly, some of the key findings, and I won't cover everything, it's in your packet, which is online, but some high-level findings that, we asked, a list of investments that the county is considering related to economic recovery for use of these dollars, and I'll just list the top 3 or 4, not all of them. Supporting county-based businesses that are under the 20 employees, over 88% thought this was a valuable or very valuable use of the funds. Supporting county-based farms, both agriculture and livestock, 85% valuable or very valuable. Supporting county-based restaurants, 84% valuable or very valuable. Supporting nonprofits that work to assist those in need, 83%. So really positive responses. When we looked at questions related to future disaster preparedness, I felt those responses were even stronger. Again, there's just the top few here. Ensuring first responders' ability to safely respond to emergencies, 95%. Supporting continuation and resiliency of 911 services during disasters, 94%. Improving wildfire mitigation, 93%. Obviously, we've had a lot of that here lately, so it's keen on everybody's mind, and I think that's indicative of what's valuable to the folks in Clackamas County, but also it's a good response for Clackamas County to have. I will say, when we initially got the funding, we were thinking disaster preparedness was a good use of these funds when we thought that the money was a lot more flexible. Disaster preparedness is harder to find within the new guidance, and so this is part of the survey where that's changed. This information is harder to use for the ARPA conversation. That doesn't mean that it's still valuable information for the county to have on what is valuable to Clackamas County. So I think that's a good way to look at this information, even though it doesn't apply to the ARPA funding perhaps as much. It's still good to know on behalf of the county where our community feels is valuable.
Well, I was rather surprised, I don't know why. I mean, the whole emergency preparedness is obviously a strong value of mine. I didn't know whether it would translate. I'm kind of sad to say here that not allowed for in the art funding at all. Is that what you're telling me today?
Not that it's not allowed, it's just that we would have to tie it to COVID in some way, or perhaps find other flexibilities for it. And so, for example, and we can get into the weeds if you'd like, but uses of the funding around water infrastructure, clean water, and broadband, that has very flexible use within the bill. It's not as tied to COVID for some reason.
Yeah, but that's really watered down version.
I like the pun, I appreciate it.
Of emergency preparedness, in my opinion, but it is what it is.
But we've talked a lot about, throughout the county, how broadband is an essential piece of our disaster preparedness. And so that flexibility there creates some opportunities. But I guess what I'm saying is it's just not as tied to COVID-19, perhaps, as the wildfire uses are. However, that's part of what we're thinking could be applied to our comment period for the interim guidance. Because we had disasters during the COVID-19 pandemic, so our needs during the COVID-19 pandemic were exacerbated by the pandemic. And so that creates a question for us. Does that spread, and does that create a need for us to think about this in a different way that perhaps other counties or other agencies are also trying to deal with? And that's a question that we can submit to the Treasury, and they can tell us yes or no to that.
And I think just to add to that, part of the guidance too is it's very equity focused as well. So I think some of the things we're talking about too in preparedness, if we can tie those to COVID as well as the equity piece, so we might be able to make a case for some other things. But what you say, Chair, is true. It's pretty watered down for what we can get for preparedness.
All right. Yeah, go ahead with that. Also, are there any punitive measures from the federal government if we are found to be in non-compliance when we spend any of these funds?
Yes.
And what are those?
We would be required to reimburse the funding that we use in that.
For how much? For what we spent that on?
Yeah, so we spend it on something that is not approved. It comes out of our general fund dollars.
Well, that's good to know. So we'll have to be careful now, won't we? Okay, go ahead, Trent.
Yeah, not much more here. Two more questions that we asked, again, related to the uses of the funding that we knew at the time. Restoring lost revenue to the county services, such as road maintenance, parks, recreation, health clinics, and tourism. 83% of the survey respondents felt that was valuable or very valuable. And then providing premium pay to essential workers, which again is a called out use within the bill. 65% thought it was valuable or very valuable. So still pretty favorable there. And then we appreciated these comments. We asked, how did you feel the county was doing in response to the wildfires? 83% positive. To COVID-19, 71% positive. To the ice storm, 70% positive. That's a great response. And then we asked which of the county's 5 strategic priorities is most valued when thinking about their quality of life. And most everybody said ensure safe, healthy, secure communities. That's 43%. And then the other 4 of the priorities got about 12 to 17%. So that one really stood out there, which makes a lot of sense considering ensure safe, healthy, secure communities fits nicely within the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's a quick overview of the survey, and we're here to answer any questions.
Regarding premium pay, it polled in this survey a little lower than I had personally hoped it would. But I'm going to go on the limb here and make this statement. I think maybe it goes out into the public and there's not a premium attached to continuing to provide the same services that you always provide during a time of disaster. I believe our public thinks it is expected. Our public still demands that regardless of all of the bad stuff happening, that the government is going to continue to fix potholes, continue to answer the 911 calls, continue to have our clinics open, continue to collect the taxes and everything else that government provides. And it's just as difficult for some of our employees to provide those services as it is the private sector, but we keep on going with that. And I do attach a premium to our employees in premium pay, and Gary and I have had these conversations, and in the last union president's meeting, they came back with some information that I thought was very generous and gracious. And the board can hear that. It's up to Gary. So I do put a high value on premium pay for our employees, whereas maybe the survey results don't indicate that. And I think that may be, and I have said this before, to be the very first allocation that we make with this money. And I think we need to do some figuring on who those employees are, and how many employees they are, because obviously it's not all 2,200, and how we're going to go about doing that. We will relay to you what their ask was. And by the way, all union presidents said the same thing. Imagine that. And if we can afford to do that or not. So to me, I feel that's one of the first actions we could take with this, and still being in compliance and still be within the scope of what our duties and what our values are. Did anybody, other commissioners, have any comments on that?
Yeah, I have a question.
Commissioner Fisher?
So just to help me understand better, could somebody give an example of how that would play out to provide premium pay? Like what type of position, what kind of dollars? What's a greater definition of that?
So I will start, I'll let Gary share what he wants to share with what the union said. But so we would define, it's pretty broad in how we can define who those individuals are. So for example, we're looking at probably most likely people that have been working since day one who never ever went home, right? It's like they were there, CCSO, CCOM, EOC staff that came in every day, those types of individuals. The guidance also does include, it's very broad in the guidance though, so we have to make some decisions because it also talks about grocery workers, migrant farm workers. There's also, we've discussed this, there's probably not enough money anywhere to make, everyone that's in the guidance and give them those dollars. So for here at Clackamas County, for our employees, we have to make that decision, which is pretty broad, and how we can do that. And I will let Administrator Schmidt talks about what he's learned from the union.
I'm not prepared to share with you the decision yet because I haven't made it, but the union presidents have unanimously agreed at Clackamas County that they are requesting $3,500 per essential employee and 80 hours of extra vacation time for the work that they conducted. And again, my definition is an employee that's worked on site since March 2020 without a break, providing an essential critical service. So first I need to compile how many employees that means. Once I do that, I'll report back to the board and then make a recommendation to you on that.
Thank you, Gary. Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, my question is, okay, so evidently it's not as flexible as we thought it was going to be. So here's the question. Do we get approval from the federal government prior? Or do we spend the money first thinking we're complying and then get nailed for it?
Elizabeth, do you want to?
Elizabeth Comfort, would you like to come up and make a comment on that, please?
I mean, that's my concern, is that we want it to be flexible. It's obvious we have a lot of needs out there. But do they give us a compliance A-OK first, or do we just wait and see if we?
Well, my recommendation as the finance director for Clackamas County would wait for the final guidelines prior to spending. I think that would be wise as we are collecting what categories and how we want to use those funds. This also buys us time to be very intentional. But my recommendation would be to wait for that final recommendation. Otherwise, as Nancy said, we would be paying for that out of our general fund, any unapproved expenses.
And so when will the final recommendations happen? Unless the federal
Well, the open period for comments, July 9th.
Pardon me?
The July 9th is when open comment
so it will be later in July is I'm looking at trend.
published a date yet.
That's our guess.
Okay.
But the one thing that is good about waiting too, we have several things in play in money and other buckets that is coming down from the state as well as the feds. And I think Trent's going to talk about that a little bit too, but there's some state money that is coming down. We should know by the end of we think by the end of this month where that money is going to go. And then there's more money coming down from the American Rescues Act too, from the feds, and we still are not clear on where all of that money is going. So if we want to be really intentional in trying not to double fund and be more thoughtful about, where are the gaps that funding is leaving. Do you have anything to add to some of that?
Yes, thank you. So, I mean, y'all know this, I believe, the commissioners, that, we have state legislative agendas and federal legislative agendas, so we have a lot of project asks that are out there. Some of them are, I don't know, far from, COVID programs, but some of them are water related or broadband related. And so the state legislature closes here in just a few weeks. And so there's a lot of funding requests that could tidy up there that might shine some light on things that we might not need to spend money on, in the future. So that's a few weeks away. That's a very close timeline and within the area of the guidance continuing to be interim. So that's a good milestone to wait for, to learn more about what money is out there. Additionally, not just the counties and not just the cities, but the states got funding, and here in Oregon, every legislator was given a budget of sorts to sort of propose their preferred projects to spend money on. And so our state legislators, our state delegation members have created, I'm going to call it a wish list because it's not quite clear yet how that's going to manifest, but those projects will come to light sooner than later. And we're trying to collect that information as well. That will tell us, again, what projects that may have a small Venn diagram with the county, where there's overlap. Some of those projects may require some additional funding from the county, or they may be requested additional funds from the county to match some of those investments, or perhaps the board will see like there's money over there, we can spend it over here. And so they'll just create more opportunities, and we'll have more information for you to make, in my opinion, better decisions with, because you'll have more data.
Sounds like if we take our time on this, Martha, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just a point of clarification. The additional money coming down from the state is CARES money, correct?
Not all of it,
Okay,
no.
or is it, not all of it, but some of it is?
There is some CARES dollars because the state still has some CARES dollars that they can spend through the end of December.
Okay.
And there are, Public Health just got some of those dollars, and I believe Sarah Ekman's going to come up and talk about businesses in a moment. Like that 2.7 million is coming, I believe, from those CARES dollars.
Okay.
Our CARES dollars runs out at the end of June because that's when our contract runs out with the state.
And then the rest of it is all ARPA from the state, too. In other words, the state is getting an
part of it-
allocation, and we are getting a direct allocation, are we not?
The state has received a direct allocation, and I don't know how their stuff is unfolding because we've been tracking the county side of it. But yes, the legislators have been,
Okay.
I don't want to say given some of it, but they
So
have a
that's
budget
where-
that they're working with.
That's where their wish list comes from the state, but then we get direct allocations as well from ARPA.
The county will receive $81 million total from
Okay.
American Rescue Plan, and the state
Thank
has
you.
received over 700 million, and about 200 and something of that, I don't remember the exact number, is being divvied up amongst legislators.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, well, I appreciate Elizabeth's recommendation, and I agree with that we wait for the guidance. I would say in light of the state funding with some remaining CARES Act dollars, we know what that guidance is. It sounds like we know how we can divvy out those dollars if we have any left, or how the state could divvy them out. And based on our earlier discussion this morning with regard to rent assistance for people that are renting apartments or people that are in shelters or the hotels, maybe there's does that fit? Obviously, it's fitting now. So if we funded it with CARES Act dollars today, we should be able to fill it with CARES Act dollars July 1 if there's some remaining dollars. I don't know. But I did want to ask one question, and that is, of all the guidance we have thus far, what do we feel is the most secure thing that we can safely spend without getting a slap on the wrist?
So I will, my colleagues can correct me if they like. I feel like the safest right now is looking at essential employees, because when you looked at what we got initially and what we have now is pretty consistent. There's not a lot of changes there. They did add a little bit of definition, but there's not a lot of changes there. Anything that we need for the EOC or for vaccinations or anything in public health related to COVID is very, very safe. That's probably the safest thing we have. I think we could do things for businesses, but I think it would be very limited. And I'm not sure how quickly we could get that out. But I could look at the guidance and see consistently some things about small businesses. And I think that's around, 50 employees or fewer. Those are the three things I think are the safest. Of those three, I think the businesses is the least safest.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, I will direct your attention to page 2 of the report. At the very top, there are 6 notable categories for use of funds that have been identified by this committee. One of them is premium pay for essential workers. That is why I brought it up, because that is very definitive. I think that's very safe. Another one that you cannot mince words on is also broadband infrastructure. To me, that is very definitive, and you can't really mess that up if you're going to invest that. But some of these others, and then Nancy mentioned support for public health response, obvious. And I think the others need to be more clearly defined for us to move forward. Is that what you're saying, Nancy?
So the broadband, we do have, if you want to, Dave DeVore is on Zoom, but that one, he said there's some things that are in there that we would fit into and would be eligible for, and some things that we would not.
Okay.
And we do have some state, $3 million in state money in play here as well for broadband.
Wow.
Cross your fingers.
Cross your fingers.
Well, that department can certainly put their proposal together for us to look at based on their evaluation of what we can spend it on. Like Trent says, if we get any more matching funds from the state, and then we can decide the priorities with broadband as we go forward.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm wondering too, on broadband, is there any way to get any more grants from the federal government outside of the emergency funds, just the normal broadband infrastructure push that's going on in America now?
Yes,
we were constantly, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, well, we also have, I know we have someone available to answer that question.
What was that, Nance?
Dave DeVore is here to answer that question too, I
Oh, okay.
think.
He's online.
Hello, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
We are constantly looking at other options. Some of the ones that we've been looking at, like the RDA and so forth, their requirements for underserved and so forth don't meet most of our criteria. They will be, plus they usually have matching funds that are required as well. But there are quite a few other ones that we're looking at, like the HB 3127 Fire Recovery Act has some potential funding that we're looking at. And also some, like they were mentioning earlier, some of the legislative support funding. We've also put in some requests for funding as well. So we're trying anything we can possibly go for, we're going for.
Thank you very much. So, staff, do you have anything else to say in any of this? In conclusion?
I would like to bring Sarah Ekman up to talk about what we are doing for businesses right now, because we do have some money going out for them. And if Sarah could sit there, if you don't mind. We have to.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Sarah, do you want to cover what we're trying to get out to businesses this month and where the money is coming from, please?
Certainly. So we are trying to get dollars out to our businesses this month, since we're in June already. We have some remaining CARES dollars, so we're looking at an available $300,000 to potentially distribute to the local business community. And then, as you're aware, we also have the $2.7 million that is pass-through of CARES dollars from the state. And we're working on the logistics of that. There's some nuances to how those agreements need to be structured that we're working through, but that will ultimately go out to the business community as well. So leading up to this point, we've had over $5 million go out to our businesses through, I believe it's 4 rounds of grants. And so to be able to do something again, we'd be on our 5th round, and then looking to distribute that $2.7 million as soon as we can have some certainty of who will be doing that distribution for us, if indeed it's a third party.
Can you talk about the power company?
Yes. Another program that we're looking at doing is also using some remaining CARES dollars to work with local utility companies, and we're looking at electric providers as well as natural gas providers. to help businesses who have accounts that are in arrears. And the goal of the program is to pay them current and then to reimburse the utility companies for those charges with our CARES dollars.
Oh, I like that idea. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a way to reach a lot of businesses we haven't been able to reach before. And we're hoping to be able to get that done this month so we can use some of CARES dollars for that.
Okay, good. And if you're behind in your electric bill, I know PGE said they wouldn't cut off your power, but is it a hit on your credit, do you know?
I don't know. Do you know anything about this, Sarah?
I believe eventually it can be turned over to a collection agency and could potentially impact your credit.
It's really up to them.
I think it takes a while.
So when you distribute to the businesses, how do you do that? How do you identify them, and is there an application process?
There will be. Up until this point, we've used an organization called Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon, and we work with them to set the guidelines and criteria for business applicants. And so as we move forward with a service such as what MISO provides, whether it's with them or a different entity, then we develop the guidelines at the county level, and they facilitate the program on our behalf because they have the administrative capacity to do that.
And then how do our businesses find out about this?
We publicize it through our press releases, social media channels. We have very intentional outreach to a lot of historically disadvantaged business owners, as well through our Emergency Operations Center Liaison Program and many of our community partners to make sure that people hear about the program.
This next round that goes through, is it targeted for businesses who have not received money up to this point, or do you do repeats? How's that work?
I know that we have guidance from how we can spend this from the state. So I think we may get businesses more than once. Is that correct? It's a potential?
It's a potential. We have allowed businesses to reapply in the past as long as they've submitted new eligible expenses. So they have to have incurred, they can't benefit twice for the same expense. But if they have new expenses, then they have been eligible to reapply.
Okay, got it. That makes sense, yeah. Commissioners, any comments? Gary?
Could you explain why we can't give money directly to business resource centers?
We are working through this. So our business recovery centers are through our chambers of commerce. We have a contractual relationship with our chambers of commerce to provide this service. And the grant dollars that we would provide come with funding obligations that we have to pass through in the form of a subrecipient grant agreement. And so the entity, in the past, we've done this with MISO, and they've been able to accept the roles and responsibilities that come with that subrecipient relationship. And so we are working closely with the BRCs to see if there's a way for them to accept that, but it does not look at this juncture like that's a possibility. So we would have to go through a different entity who has that capability.
Why is it not a possibility?
There's a long list of obligations that a subrecipient agrees to take on. And our finance department does an excellent job of kind of summarizing those, but they have to agree to keep certain records, allow access to records. They keep them for a certain period of time. They work with us on specific reporting requirements. They have to be registered in sam.gov and have a DUNS number. So there's a long list of things that the subrecipient has to agree to and have the capacity to administrate.
Well, on the subrecipient process, are we giving certain chambers an opportunity to meet those criteria, or are we just assuming they can't?
We are. We have shared the last agreement that we had with another entity with them, and they're currently reviewing that to let us know if they would be able to meet those obligations.
Great. Commissioner Scholl, you're up.
Yes, I didn't hear anything in a discussion today about mental health and on the categories for use of funds. Number one, support public health response. As I get around the county, people talk to me about the pressing need for alleviating mental health problems, and also the need for some sort of intake facility to take in people with pressing mental health problems to get them stabilized and taken care of. And whether that's something we do in the county or whether we put money aside to contract with some existing facility out there to take care of our people, that's something I think we need to really think about. Thank you.
Trent?
Thank you. So under the, just to answer your question, Commissioner Schull, under the public health responses and the fact sheet in the back of your packet, it lists out a few potential uses within those categories, and several of those are mental health treatment, substance misuse treatment, other behavioral health services, hotlines and warm lines, crisis intervention, and services and outreach to promote access to health and social services. So behavioral health is definitely called out here.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, well, Gary, thank you for bringing up the BRCs. I was going to ask that very question. So I understand the answer, the response. So is there a role for the BRCs as far as connecting with businesses that doesn't give them the burden of administration and record keeping that it sounds like they're not willing to sign up for?
We do see that there's definitely a role, and we've been, staff have been working with them to brainstorm on what that could look like. And the nice part is if we do have to go with another entity to facilitate the dollars, you know, we can still work with the BRCs to craft the criteria, to help get the word out, and, you know, possibly a bit more in terms of having them, you know, review and do things like that. So we're trying to sort that out to ensure that they can be involved if they can't facilitate the whole program, because they have valuable input to bring to the table, and they have very real information about where dollars can make a great impact on the business community. So we are trying to figure that out.
Yeah, you know, from just watching some interviews on the news, national news, you know, I have heard, you know, there's been issues of fraud where people got CARES Act money or business recovery and so forth, and there's a lot of fraud being put in place. And same with PPP, you know, Paycheck Protection Program. So you know, it's a reality, but there again, those checks and balances are what keeps everyone honest, ideally, you know, in an ideal situation. So, you know, I've heard some businesses say that it's not worth it. It's really not worth it to apply. And I think that's a decision that every business owner would probably want to make, is say, should I or should I not, you know, go through all of this? It's probably different for every business.
It is, and there are requirements of the business owners in terms of submitting documentation to validate, you know, their expense claims and those kinds of things, and sometimes they do decide not to apply.
And I'm always compelled to say when we talk about businesses, you know, and why they're ranked pretty high in recovery is they employ people, they employ our citizens and our family members and so on. So they are a big part of that and big part of our economy. So just want to get that out there, that we're not just giving money to businesses for the sake because they're a business. It's really about their employees and the economy and the services they provide. So they're valued for those reasons.
Any other questions or comments for the presenters today? Nancy, do you have more information?
We don't have more information, but I would like to just confirm with the commissioners and Gary, I don't know if we needed to vote to start using on July 1st the ARPA funds for the EOC in response to COVID. Do we need a vote on that, or just? How much are you asking for? It's going to be $300,000 to probably $300,000 to $550,000 a month.
A month?
A month.
Where is this coming from?
So right now it's coming from CARES. So that's staff time that works in the EOC, which includes, we do have a couple of contractors for PGA working on content. We have someone there that's helping us out with financial issues. So it's some of those contracts, staff time that's still being billed to the EOC. And we also have some materials that we've been purchasing for vaccination clinics. It will start, it's going to continue to go down.
Okay, you mean the funding that you're currently receiving will continue to go down?
No, the funding we're currently receiving, what I'm saying is the cost of the EOC will continue to go down.
Oh,
and
yes, obviously.
We are also looking at demobilization of the EOC, which we're hoping will be at the end of August, but we don't know that for sure. So we're hoping that we only have July and August, maybe September, to keep the EOC running.
So this is separate from our public health department and Philip Joyner when he
Yes,
says
it is
supplying the vaccination. There's all kinds of money for supplying the vaccination, and I think they're overflowing in that.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is you have not received an equal or even proportionate amount of funding for your operations
Oh,
to go
no.
forward.
Everything we have been getting is from our CARES dollars for the EOC. So yes, Philip is getting more money, and he and I are sitting down to take a look at what might be able to be shifted over. But his money is going for, yes, for vaccination clinics, for staff, contact tracing and those types of things. But there's some things that are still outside of that we need to run through the Emergency Operations Center.
Well, I'm going to ask if, Gary, would you take some time to review this request and report back to us?
Yes, yes. Let's bring
I
it
think
back,
I
Nancy.
think that's fair, and I think that your decision, whatever you decide, let us know,
Okay.
and we can discuss that. Anything else, Nancy?
I don't think so. We are working on criteria, like we said, and if you do have certain criteria that you want to make sure that we include as we start looking at businesses as well as nonprofits and those types of things, and whenever they give us.
Well, I think our criteria sounds like it's going to be defined for us regardless of our personal preferences.
And we already have been working on equity criteria, so, okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Commissioner Fisher, are you in the queue?
Yep. So I'm just curious with your request for ARP, I want to say ARPA, but is it ARP?
It's ARPA.
ARP dollars to be used for the EOC, would that be the coordination to increase vaccines? I mean, I'm looking at the public relations of us working on encouraging vaccines, possibly vaccine incentives. Truly
Yeah.
the way out of this pandemic and to recovery
Yeah,
is
so
to
you're talking about
promote vaccinations?
Yeah, excuse me. So you're talking about the messaging?
Yes, I'm
Yes.
wondering what part of the system does that
That
fall
is-
into? Would
yes.
that be with these funds, or would that be with previous CARES dollars?
That would be with these funds. Moving forward, right now is CARES, but that runs out for us at the end of this month.
Okay,
So that would be with the ARPA dollars.
okay, so we got to move on this pretty quickly
Yeah,
for
and
some
so-
security, given that
Yeah.
is so important.
Yes.
For our
And I will
recovery.
definitely talk to Administrator Schmidt in the next week or
thank
so.
you.
Anything else, Gary, on this particular topic?
So the main takeaway then, Commissioners, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're okay to wait until the final guidance comes from the U.S. Treasury, which means you would not really spend money until really August 1st. Are you okay with that approach?
Well, except for the EOC.
Except for the EOC funds we just talked about. I'll come back to you in the
And
next
I
week.
would like you to formulate the amount for our employees.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
I want to know what that number is so we can make
Okay.
a decision based on how much it's going to cost us on what the union president's request was, and then how much we feel is doable in
Yes.
comparison to overall funding.
And I've committed to do that by June 30th. So by June 30th, there'll be a decision made. Doesn't mean we're going to pay it out on June 30th, but there'll be a decision made to our employees by June 30th.
Yeah, I think those two items are safe to go ahead and at least start figuring some stuff out.
All right, great. So that is all for now. Thank you, ARPA team. Fantastic work. You've been meeting every week, and you still will meet. And we'll continue with the weekly update with the board at issues.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Thank you.
Gary, what's up
If we go
next?
back to the issues list, there is an item that needs to be covered today. That is the 2021 National Association of Counties Conference. The conference is going to be in person this year and virtual. It's a hybrid conference. It will be the week of July 18th through 13th, 2021 in Maryland.
Where is that again?
Maryland,
At what dates? I'm sorry.
July 8 through 13. There is a registration date that closes like this week, so I'm seeking interest of who would like to attend in person to this conference.
I've already signed up, Gary, to
Okay, we
attend.
have Martha, we have Commissioner Schrader who wants to go. I think this is a just wonderful thing to do. And who else wants to do this? Will she have staff support, Gary?
Normally, no. I've kind
Okay.
of changed that. No staff support unless we have at least 3 commissioners going, then we just send a staff person.
Okay, any other commissioner wants to attend this conference in Maryland?
I'll be attending virtually.
Virtually, Paul?
Yeah, and I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
I need to, I'm
And
gonna,
when is the final date to decide, Gary?
There's just a registration price break if you register within the next few days.
Oh,
but
okay,
You can
well-
register up till July 8th. so,
Commissioner Fisher, why don't you just figure out your schedule and just let the staff know?
okay.
Anybody else? I won't be attending, so.
And then next, you do have to designate one person to serve as the voting member for Clackamas County at the National Association Board meeting. In the past, it was Commissioner Schrader, as she is a board member of the National Board, but just need you to confirm if you would like Commissioner Schrader to continue that
Do
role.
we need to vote on that, Gary?
That would be nice, yes.
I move that Commissioner Schrader be our vote nationally.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made by me and seconded by you.
And Paul.
Me and you, okay. Any further discussion? Christina, please call the poll.
All right, Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye, thank you.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
And Chair Smith?
Aye, motion passes 5-0.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Back to the issues list. So Chair Smith, are you okay with postponing the history and culture resolution to next week?
Yes, I am, but let's make sure we get that up.
Next week,
Thank you.
and then-
In fact, I recommended we do that. Yes, Gary.
You have 5 minutes if you'd like to do Commissioner Communications.
Well, I'm going to pass on my commissioner communication. I've said enough today. I would personally like to get the next issue teed up and get that discussed. But if there's any commissioner who wants to say something now,
Yeah, just
Commissioner Schrader.
Quick thing, HB 2564 to establish the Willamette Falls Locks Authority, a public corporation, was passed by the Oregon Senate, and it will go to the governor's desk for signature. So-
Yeehaw!
So thanks to your work, Commissioner, and
Yeah.
my work.
Your
and
work.
Everybody's work. We
I tell
were able
ya.
to do it. Yay.
Yes, I think that is going to be fortuitous, and it's going to help us realize the goals for that piece of property.
Going, yeah.
Any other commissioner would like to say something?
Yeah, I want to say that I went to the Blazer game on Thursday, the
Oh.
first event that happened, that was the big event, and this is my Rip City mask that was given to me. We did not win that game, but it was very, very close. It was very, very exciting, and it was amazing
You really loved it, huh?
to be back. Well, to be back in it was kind of strange, actually, but, yeah, so I just wanted to let my commissioners know that.
Well, thank you. I think that's great. Gary?
All right, ready for the policy session, your last one for today. Barton and Carver Parks, Summer Congestion Planning and Policy. We have staff from Business and Community Services, Transportation and Development, County Council, and the Sheriff's Office. Whoever's presenting, come on forward. Scott, looks like you're starting. County Council, go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon, Board. Scott Seco with County Council. I'm going to take the lead on the presentation today. I think today, being our first 90-degree day of the year, is the perfect opportunity to talk about this issue that seems to recur every summer at both Barton and Carver Parks on the Clackamas River. So as you all are probably already aware, every summer, particularly on weekends when we get hot days, there are hordes and hordes of people that flock to the Clackamas River to float the river. In the past, we've had issues with alcohol. Parks changed the rules to prevent alcohol from being admitted into the parks. Of course, it still gets through, it still gets on the rivers. And the crowds are really just unavoidable. There's not a way to keep people away from the parks. We can't just shut down the roads. People are gonna find ways to access the parks, or access the river, and it's probably safer to have them do it through our parks, frankly, than just having them make their own access and trying to cut through private property. So, be that as it is, being stuck with this problem, we're here today to talk about the best way to address it, and particularly the best way to address it in light of the limited resources that the county has. Again, the reality is there are huge numbers of people that are going out there, and there is just not enough staff. We don't have enough people to be out there constantly keeping eyes on the number of people that are coming to our parks and coming to our rivers. Even when the parks get full and the gates are closed, that doesn't stop people from coming. They're parking on the roads, there's congestion, there's people walking on the roads from outside of the parks trying to get into the parks. And so we have to do the best with what we have. And the two main issues that come up with this are really kind of the PR type issues and dealing with the neighbors, people that have to deal with the frustration, that live in the area and see this problem year in and year out. And then also there's a liability risk that's also associated with it, which is why I'm here. And that liability risk is essentially, these are county roads, these are county parks. We know that they get congested, we know they get crowded, we know that fights happen, we know there's alcohol involved. And so what are we gonna do to limit that risk and to protect ourselves when inevitably somebody's gonna hit somebody, somebody's gonna get killed, there's gonna be a car crash, and the county's gonna get sued. They're gonna say, these were your parks, these are your roads, and you should have done something more. And so my goal in all of this as legal counsel is to try to help the county and the various departments come up with a cohesive plan
for how to address that. And I'm asking you all today, all of the staff is asking you to make a policy determination about how those limited resources are going to be allocated. And when the Board of County Commissioners does that, it avails the county to a defense that's in the Oregon Tort Claims Act, and that's called discretionary immunity. So essentially, that's what we're asking you to do today. Rather than just having staff do what they've done in the past, which is make the best decisions that they can day to day, we're asking the board to become involved and make a policy decision to approve this plan.
Well, this is interesting to me, because the last time I was a commissioner, the sheriff came to us and asked us to take some specific action on Barton Park. And it just created just a storm, oh my gosh. But I don't regret taking that action. But this is an ongoing problem every year, correct, Scott? And it has not been addressed until now?
It has
in
been
the way that you're addressing it?
That is correct. To my knowledge, there has not been in the past this type of cohesive plan and policy decision that's been made by the board. There have been specific remedies that have been considered and adopted, but nothing to this extent.
And the signage is permanent?
So signage is certainly one of the issues, and that's one of the things that is very feasible, and we are asking the board to endorse, and that has to do with permanent signage in the corridors near Barton and Carver Park. Joe Merrick is here from DTD if you have questions specifically for him, but he weighed the different options for signage, and he is recommending that we enlarge the no parking zone, so we add no parking signage on the county roads outside of the parks, and also that we add signs indicating congestion ahead that also have information about when to expect the congestion and where that congestion is most likely to be found.
I would like Mr. Merrick to come forward and explain verbally what policy, exactly what you want this board to approve.
Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. So regarding the signing, we have been installing no parking signing, which we do through delegated authority, actually for a very long time, probably close to 20 years. We've been dealing with congestion problems around Barton and Carver. So the two areas where typically we've had no parking signing is along portions of Springwater Road around Carver, and then some portions of Baker's Ferry up near Barton Park Road. Essentially what we are looking at doing right now is basically expanding those no parking areas to try to preserve the operations of the roadway and make sure people are as safe as they can be when we get these huge surges in traffic.
And who's going to enforce the no parking? I read here we just have one CCO. CCSO.
Sure, Chair Smith, and I'm happy to talk about that. Also, Captain Brad O'Neill from the Sheriff's Office is here. He is the captain over the patrol unit for the Sheriff's Office. If you'd like to hear from him, I'm sure he's willing to talk to you about that. But the Sheriff's Office, much like other departments, is facing a significant staffing shortfall. And so enforcement is also part of this plan. And it involves the policy decision of whether to try to order tows for the cars that are illegally parked or whether to issue citations. And the recommendation to this board is that tows be only ordered in the situations where a vehicle is parked so that it's obstructing the flow of traffic. And the reason for that is that a single tow, to tow a single vehicle, takes a deputy or a reserve deputy between 1 and 2 hours of time, and to have that much time to tow a single vehicle, the recommendation is that it only be used for those presenting an imminent risk to the traveling public, and that the rest of the time reserves and deputies issue citations. There is a recommendation about the citation amount. Currently, the board has that set for parking illegally, that the fine is $40. We are asking that that fine be increased to $80. Right now, inside the parks, if you park illegally, the citation is $80, but if you were to park illegally on the street, it's only $40. That is, as far as I could find in the appendix, the lowest traffic or parking fine in the county. So by doubling it to 80, it would make it more consistent with other parking and traffic infractions.
Continue, Joe.
Thank you.
And the no parking towaway zones, actually, we've had those installed for several years along Springwater Road. And so in that section of Springwater, basically what we've been doing is kind of cleaning up the no parking zones, because we had no parking that's been put in on and off over the course of 20 years. And so what we did was, working with Parks and Council and the Sheriff's Office, looked at all those areas around Carver, all those areas around Barton, and developed a more comprehensive and consistent no parking plan. So all the signs will be the same. They'll all be spaced correctly per the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. We'll have tow-away zone on all the signs. So it will be much more understandable for those people who choose to acknowledge that the signs are there and not park. So again, it's not, we've had these signs before. We're really just doing a lot of cleanup.
So you're
and-
recommending fines instead of towing? It says here in the document on page 8. It says, the recommended use of citations rather than towing is due to the staffing shortages described above, correct? Is that what I'm reading?
Yeah, citations are the simplest for them to issue, and typically the sheriff's office will tow when, like, a car is creating a road hazard. So if it's parked partly in the road and it's causing some kind of a hazard.
And only in extreme circumstances will you tow a vehicle, correct?
Yeah, and we don't order the tows. So this was the.
Well, that's a law enforcement issue, right?
Correct,
So they have discretion to order a tow whenever they feel necessary.
correct.
It is not up to this board to do that, correct? Somebody answer, Scott?
They do have that discretion, but again, what we're asking the board to do is take kind of a holistic look at this plan and endorse it.
Well, okay. You know, that's sweet. Us take a holistic look. We pass this and kabam, we're slapped upside the head. I guess I'm having a PTSD moment when we inspected cars for alcohol and the last time around. This sounds nice, but what I want to see before this is passed today is I want to see bullet points A, B, and C, exactly what's going to happen. And then I'm afraid your holistic approach kind of goes out the window. Because our public is going to look at this and they're going to say, oh, they're at it again. I don't disagree that parking is an issue. I don't disagree that people want to go out and enjoy our public places. But if we have all these no parking signs up, they're probably going to go find some other place to park where there's not a no, and they're going to walk 2 miles. I mean, I've seen that. So we're trying to alter behavior here. And that's, I don't know. Paul, you have a comment?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the plan. I think they need all the tools they can get, and they'll administer those tools or use those tools as they see fit. So it's not as though they're going to be, sounds like it, just, towing away vehicles left and right. It doesn't sound like that at all. So, in hearing from property owners along the river with people cutting through their properties, I was there, watched it, saw it. It still happens. We get complaints about people doing that, even as far north as Oregon City, Gladstone area, where people just cut through people's property to access the river. So, doing nothing, I don't think is responsible, knowing the problem here, and increasing the fee. That's another deterrent. Whatever we can do. So I'm supportive.
Commissioner Schrader, you're up.
Yeah, I can get there too, because we've seen things like, fist fights in the parking lots, and it gets so hot out. I was surprised we didn't get anything going on this weekend. I haven't heard anything with the weather. And, the whole alcohol thing, people aren't, it's really a lack of responsibility. But anyway, rather than get into that, because that is a behavior change, I know. I'm curious, do we know who is coming to the parks? I mean, is it mostly Clackamas County folk? Are we seeing a lot of regional use from
I
around
don't
the
know the answer to that,
Portland
Commissioner
area?
Schrader. I'm not sure if
Sarah Ekman or Tom Riggs can speak to those points for you, though. They're both present as well from BCS County Parks.
Yeah, you know, I've always kind of wondered, I've always kind of said, hey, we get a lot of out-of-county folks using these parks, so, but I don't know if we've ever done a formal, you know.
I don't have formal statistics on that. I do have anecdotal evidence from some deputies who ran through the parks on some busy days and said the license plates the majority were from outside of county, primarily Multnomah and Washington, but that a number of them were Clackamas County residents as well. But it's not like it's 90% Clackamas residents, it's regional.
It is a regional, they are being used as regional parks, yeah. Okay, that's what I thought, and unfortunately, we're a popular recreation area in this county.
We do.
Both there and at Barton and up the river, and I don't know how we solve that. We can't turn people away whether they're from our county or not, so. But thank you for that, I was curious.
Any other comments from commissioners? Staff, have you finished with your presentations today?
I'm happy to touch on some of the other highlights from the plan, if that's helpful to the board.
Yes, it is.
And Chair Smith, one thing I just would reiterate is, again, what we're asking you to do here is really, in large part, to help avail us to this discretionary immunity. It's a matter of this is not proposed to you as a perfect fix to what's going on there. This is being proposed merely as the best we can do, at least the best that staff can recommend to you with the resources that are available. And by doing this, by making a policy decision to this end, it's not necessarily saying that this is the best plan. It's the best plan with what we can do, and it will hopefully help us when inevitably somebody does get hurt along the road.
Can you explain to me again discretionary immunity and why that's an issue?
Sure. The Oregon Tort Claims Act is the mechanism through which the county is sued as a public body. And when the legislature enacted that, they carved out several defenses that are available for public bodies. One of them is called discretionary immunity. And the courts it is continuously getting narrowed by the courts because they don't like immunity, whether it's for public bodies or anybody else, frankly. But what it means is it acknowledges the difficult decision that public bodies are in and that they do have limited resources. And that defense has been affirmed when public bodies are doing exactly what we're asking you to do today, and that is to allocate those resources in the best way possible and make choices between different options. So, for example, to accommodate pedestrians at the parks, you could budget money to build sidewalks along these county roads. Mm-hmm. That's an option.
Yeah, right.
You could hire flaggers to stand out there and escort people through. Those options, though, are not likely economically feasible, and so they're not being recommended today. Another option is to do what's recommended in this plan. And again, a sidewalk may be safer, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best option to go with today in light of what's available.
Okay. And continue, please.
Sure. So you, Chair Smith, you already touched on permanent signing, and you heard from Joe Merrick about that. The other thing, another element of this plan is simply, I guess it's largely to make the board aware about the severe staffing shortages that are being experienced through both BCS County Parks and also the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, who are both the entities responsible for directly dealing with this problem. County Parks, and Tom Riggs can certainly speak to this in greater detail if you'd like to hear from him, but they rely primarily in the summer on seasonal positions. They have 17 seasonal positions between the two parks, Barton and Carver. Currently, only 6 of those are filled, with 3 in process, leaving 8 vacant still as of now, again with this hot summer season about to kick off. Those park staff are not necessarily, they are not law enforcement. They're not trained to be law enforcement. So they're really in the parks doing primarily park maintenance. Sure, they're available to talk to guests and help guests and things of that nature, but they really, the recommendation of the board is not to rely on those types of park staffs to issue citations, to require tows, to break up altercations, to quiet disturbances, things of that nature. So that's a major shortfall in staffing that Parks is dealing with.
Parks also is responsible for paying for reserve deputies that they use. They currently have a budget of $15,000 for their reserve deputies, which will pay for one deputy between the parks for 3 shifts per week. So that might be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or if a holiday fell on a weekend, that could be a Saturday, Sunday, Monday. But in any effect, that's one reserve deputy between the 2 parks, and that's all that's in the budget right now. As for the sheriff's office, I'm sorry, I should also touch on private security is also going to be relied upon by parks. They have $55,000 in their budget for private security. That is good, hopefully for 2 to 3 individual private security officers for 4 shifts a week during the summer. So that can certainly help with this. But that's what's available in the budget. If other money were to become available, certainly additional private security might become available because the contracting amounts could go up. The reserve deputies, as for the sheriff's office, is an issue just because, again, there aren't enough. Reserve deputies are volunteers. There's not a way to assign deputies to parks specifically. It depends on when they're available and how many are available. And at this point, my understanding is that the sheriff's office doesn't have sufficient reserves to dedicate them to the parks on all of these busy summer days. There's just not staffing available. Likewise for the permanent deputies. The permanent deputies, I believe they're currently 18 deputies short for their patrol, and they only have 1 deputy assigned for that entire district, which is the East County District, and it includes both Barton and Carver. It goes up to Estacada. There's only 1 deputy per shift for all of that. So again, that deputy cannot just be limited to these parks. They need to be available for higher priority calls. They'll certainly come to help out if altercations occur or when they're available, but that can't be available 24/7 to the parks. So staffing is a big issue. And we're just asking that the board approve this plan, which is to do the best they can with the staffing available and to encourage the departments to fill those positions as soon as possible.
Whereas the voters approved the levy for additional staffing for the sheriff's levy this May of 55%, those funds do not become available until next year, correct? Yes, so even though the public is expected that there will be additional deputies, it just doesn't happen overnight. I want to make sure I get that on the record. I'll entertain a motion. We have some options on page 3.
Chair, I move we approve option 1.
I'll second.
Commissioner Savas has moved to approve option 1. Commissioner Schrader has seconded the motion. Do we have any discussion? Christina, please call the poll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
And Chair Smith?
Aye, motion passes 5-0.
Okay?
Gary,
You are done for the day, Chair.
thank you for coming in, Scott, and your explanations, and everybody else.
Thank you.
We are done, Commissioners. Thank you for your participation and presence. It was a very long day, and you did well.